million, and it will be a he, by the way.
Will it be a man linked to John Lewis?
It will either be Andy Street or Sean Simon.
It's interesting because that, and for people who aren't necessarily or aren't voting in a Metro mayoral election, the Conservatives, Michael Gove's here, you might have something to say on this, the Conservatives will have been targeting that particular Metro mayor seat.
I haven't introduced them.
I know you haven't. I couldn't help it. It just made sense. Michael Gove, Emily Thornbury, Nigel Farage. I did it.
Well,
I did it without the screen.
I don't have to now.
But am I right in saying that the Conservatives have been very energetic about targeting that particular seat, surrounded by Labour MPs, traditionally a very Labour area, but a real chance for Andy Street there in that particular election?
Yes, the West Midlands mayoral race is going to be one of the most fascinating tonight. And you're absolutely right, there are a preponderance of Labour MPs at the moment in that area. But in Andy Street, we've got a formidably qualified candidate. He was chief executive of John Lewis, one of the most successful businessmen of his time, of his generation. And he's decided to go into politics because it's a part of the world he knows, loves and grew up in, and he wants to bring some of that same business expertise that's made John Lewis the most successful retailer in the UK to make the West Midlands the most successful Metro mayor.
Now, we do like a bit of balance on this programme from time to time, so Emily Thornbury is
never a good idea.
From time to time?
All the time. Emily, you served in Parliament with Sean Simon, am I right?
I did.
How do you think he has done in this election in terms of fighting Andy Street? Because obviously he was the favourite.
OK, so first of all, I think it's really interesting, this idea that this West Midlands mayor will only have £36 million a year to spend, when the Conservatives have been bragging about the fact that they've spent £1 million on this election. But what they don't have, and we have an army of volunteers, and we've been taking our messages out to the doorsteps. Sean is a local boy and I think has run a really good campaign, but we've not taken anything for granted, and have been fighting for every vote on the basis that the Tories are the party for the few and we are the party for the many.
But you got the slogan in right from the start. We didn't have a strong and stable from Michael Gove, but I'm sure it's coming imminently. Now, there are many ways you can get in touch with us over the course of the next 6 hours. Yes, I did say 6 hours. You know you can call 0345 6060973. You can text 84850, tweet at LBC, tweet at Ian Dale, at Sheila Fogarty, and we'll try and read out the best tweets and texts that come in. We're also on Facebook Live. If our voices aren't enough for you and you actually want to see our faces, you can go to the LBC Facebook page and watch us live right throughout the night. Jonathan Isaby from Brexit Central, he says, right now the best place to get local election news and speculation, emphasis on the speculation there, on the airwaves would appear to be LBC with Ian Dale and Sheila Fogarty. Moody Bear says, next big question of the night for results, do I do LBC with Ian and Sheila, or do I do Question Time and This Week, or some kind of weird channel swapping blend? Sheila, what would your answer be to Moody Bear?
Duh. Moody
Nigel
Bear.
Farage is with us. Of course, you weren't on your show earlier. Do you want to clear up the mystery as to your disappearance at 7 o'clock?
Oh, because we can't talk about politics and current affairs on polling day.
We can now, though.
So there wasn't really much I could do, was there? Apart from talk about the Duke of Edinburgh, but I think LBC have been doing that all day long.
I think we have enough Duke Ed.
Oh, no way. Leave it.
But I'm fascinated by this debate about Metro mayors and the enthusiasm being shown by the two contenders. Who wants Metro mayors? Do the public actually want this? I mean, wasn't there a referendum in Manchester where they said, no, we don't want it, and they're going to get one anyway?
It was the North East, wasn't it?
No, that was for the regional assembly.
Right,
but actually there was a referendum in Manchester where they said, no, we don't want it, but in the end they're going to get it. And I just wonder whether people actually understand how they're being governed. We have in some parts of the country, we have district councils, county councils, a plethora of mayors appearing everywhere. And I just wonder whether local government doesn't need mass simplification.
That's a fair point, Michael Gove. Surely the Conservatives are the party of small government. Here you've added another tier.
Mm. Well, as you pointed out earlier, £36 million is not a massive amount. So if you want value for money, then the Metro Mayor is someone who can exercise strategic leadership without adding significantly. In fact, if Andy Street is elected, he will reduce the amount of council tax that people have to pay. But the capacity of a mayor to change how a city is governed and perceived has already been clear in London. Whatever one thinks of Sadiq Khan or Boris Johnson or Ken Livingstone, each of them left an imprint on the capital. And certainly my experience as someone who admires the way that American politics can sometimes work is that if you have the right guy as mayor, if you have a Rudy Giuliani in New York, then you can have someone who is directly accountable for the health of the city and for crime fighting and for transport.
So you were all in favour of this when the Conservative government decided to do it?
Yes.
So what are the local councils for, Michael? I mean, this is, I'm just saying that if you were to ask people now, do they understand how their local government works? I think the vast majority would say, I haven't really got a clue.
I think that's been the case. Well, I think it's certainly been the case that local government has been a confusing patchwork for generations. But when our cities outside London were powerhouses, for example, in the late 19th century, you had people like Joe Chamberlain who were so strongly identified with the cities that people knew who the top man or now top woman would be. And I think one of the things we'll agree on, Nigel, is that the European Union referendum was partly about accountability, making sure that someone would carry the can for decisions and you could kick them out if you disagreed. And that transparency and accountability, I think, is greater with a Metro Mayor. And it means that if...
But it gets very confusing, because I was down in Bristol, and in Bristol they have a mayor, they have a good mayor. And I was on the streets of Bristol saying, I know you've got a mayor, and don't worry, he's not standing down, but you're getting another mayor, and this other mayor is for the southwest. And so you're going to have two mayors. I mean, I don't think that's very accountable or transparent. In fact, to be honest, it's extremely confusing, and we were against it. But as is the woman who was standing for mayor. But she said, but the reason...
Is it confusing that there can be a mayor in Islington and a mayor in London?
But the reason, because the mayor in Islington is symbolic and incorporates, and is our first citizen of Islington. That's fine. She has no political power. She is just simply there as first citizen.
But is it confusing, therefore, that people vote for someone to run Islington and people vote for someone to run London?
So they have a council that runs Islington, not a mayor that runs Islington, and we have a London mayor. But in Bristol, they're going to have two mayors, and both of them are going to have political power, and it's very confusing for people. We were against it, but frankly, we went for it and put a candidate up because there's money attached, and when there's so little money for local authorities, you talk about Islington. My council's been cut by 40%. 40%. We've lost 40% of our budget. So basically, any money which is available, we're up for it because, frankly, in the end, services are going to suffer otherwise.
Well, listen, speaking of accountability, 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC, and I'm sure our guests will be happy to respond to callers, will you, if they call in? You don't feel obliged, but it would be ever so nice if you did.
Well, Catherine in Wandsworth has called in. She doesn't want to come on air, but she's got a question. What is a Metro Mayor? Can somebody please explain this to me? Michael Gove, you and your government introduced them.
They're directly elected politicians who are responsible for strategic policy, including issues like transport, in city areas. So, for example, the West Midlands includes not just Birmingham, but areas like Coventry, West Bromwich, Wolverhampton, and the Metro Mayor for Manchester, Andy Burnham, is in the running for that, Sean Anstey for the Conservatives. They will be responsible not just for what was Manchester City Council, but also the surrounding
Greater
boroughs.
Manchester, which is a huge area.
Exactly, taking in Tory areas like Trafford and battleground areas like Bury and Bolton.
And I think it's a word on how Metro Mayors are voted in as well. There are three different types of voting system in these elections today, or have been today. The supplementary vote, one candidate for each party. You mark a first and second choice. If no candidate has 50% of the first preference, the top two go through to a runoff round where all the second preferences of people who voted for other candidates are reallocated. And the reason I'm keen to go through it in a little bit more detail when we're joined later on by Gareth, who can go through the figures with us and the methods of voting, is that there are a lot of people ahead of the general election, and feel free, all of you, to comment on this, who aren't satisfied with this first past the post scenario that we live with and then we've had.
Oh, you've opened up a hornet's nest there.
I know I have. But the fact that there are different methods of voting in these elections is a good opportunity to raise that again.
Just very briefly then, which voting system in an ideal world would each of you like to have? Nigel?
AV+. That was when Tony Blair did the big inquiry into this. That was what Roy Jenkins concluded, that with AV+, you would keep the link between the member and the constituency, but there'd be a second ballot paper where if you're a Labourite living in Michael's constituency or a Tory living in Emily's, there's still a purpose to go and vote on the day.
So
Two ballot papers.
So you'd rank... Would you rank on the ballot paper?
You would vote for your Member of Parliament, and then on a second ballot paper, you could vote Tory again, or Labour again, or Green,
so like
or UKIP.
The German system.
Whoever thought the Germans could teach us about democracy?
Well, there we go. Emily?
So does that mean that you'd have somebody representing a constituency and then you'd have like a floating additional person?
Yes, that's right.
Who could, if they decide that it's a marginal seat, suddenly claim that they're the alternative MP for a particular constituency and target that constituency and be and and so there would be the rivalry between the two people. So for example, if in Islington we'd had this system, we might have a Lib Dem who's supposed to be representing the whole of London, but actually she spends all her time in Islington, claiming to be the second MP.
They would in effect be regional MPs. But what you would have is a massive incentive for people to go and vote. Because what first past the post is doing, it's keeping people at home.
So, Emily, what would you go for? What system?
First past the post. So you know
Michael?
who your MP is, and they know who you are, and they may not like you, but they know people in Islington know who their MP is. That's that.
And do you think you'll say the same after June the 9th?
Well, let's see.
Michael?
I agree with Emily.
Hey.
Sheila?
Bizarrely, I agree with Nigel.
Bizarrely, I agree with Emily. How about that? That's a good way to start off the night, isn't it? I wonder what you think. If you want to ring in with your views on which electoral system we should have local elections for to under as well as national, you know the number to call.
I told you this had legs.
You did, absolutely. So how did you vote? This is the questions I want you to answer in the next hour or two. How did you vote? Did you vote with the general election in mind, or did you vote purely on local issues? 0345 6060 973. We'll have more from Emily, more from Michael, more from Nigel in just a moment. And we would expect a few ward results to start trickling in after about 10:30. We won't get full council's results until 1 or 2 in the morning, and actually going right through the morning. But we would expect to see some trends within the next couple of hours. This is LBC. It's 16 minutes past 10.
Yes, do. How did you vote? When did you vote? Where did you vote? Did you vote at all? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Driving back from my stand-up gig and loving the LBC show. I only read that just because it's right in front of me. I promise we won't do this all evening. Great guests.
Well, say who it is.
I'm about
it's Aisha. Hazarika.
Oh, it's Aisha. Sorry,
yes.
I was getting to that. Great guests, she says, and analysis from the off. Let's reintroduce our guests, Ian. Go.
Let's do it. Michael Gove is here from the Conservatives, Emily Thornberry from Labour, and Nigel Farage from UKIP. We will be joined, in case you think we're excluding the Lib Dems, we're not. Simon Hughes will be here from 11, and also Lord Dick Newby, he's their leader in the House of Lords. He'll be with us after 1. And Gavin Barwell, the local government minister, he will be here from about... Is it 12 or 1? I can't remember. Anyway, he'll be here later too. Now, we are going to continue. In fact, let's take a call. We've got lots of calls coming in. We're asking, how did you vote? Did you vote with a general election in mind or purely on local issues? I suspect it partly depends on where you live. Mark is in Chelmsford. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
You want to talk about the voting system?
Yeah, I disagree with the voting system, actually. I don't think it's a democratic vote at all, personally. The first across the post is the one thing that I think is not democratic at all. I mean, I understand how you calculate so many MPs and then they become leaders of the country, but in my way, I think of it, you know, if you add up all the votes for a particular party from the whole country, which is what we're all voting for, then if they are the ones that have got the most votes for the whole country, then they should be the ones that are in power to lead the country.
But we have a parliamentary system, not a presidential system.
Yeah, exactly. But I've never got my head around it, and I still don't think it's a democratic vote.
Emily, tell him why he's wrong.
It's because each area ought to have a distinctive voice, and there ought to be a relationship between the voters and their MP. So, you know, I can get... A lot of my constituents might be interested in one particular issue, and what I try to do as a politician is continue to learn from my constituents, and in order to try to have a distinctive voice, and somebody who may be representing the West Midlands may have a different voice, and the North of England may have a different voice. And the idea is that you have some sort of direct relationship, and if I do something that my constituents don't like, then they'll get rid of me. And my job comes up every few years, and it's for them to decide whether I come back or not.
And that's quite difficult, Mark, isn't it? On a single transferable vote system like there is in the Scottish, well, actually, that's not particularly that system. In many countries where they have a pure PR system, it's very difficult to have the constituency link, or you have massive constituencies.
There's another argument. Sorry, can I just say one other thing, Mark? Which is the other thing is that if you have a system where if you tot up the whole number of votes that a particular political party gets, then what will happen is that your place as a member of Parliament depends on how well you get on with your political party party. And one of the things which is kind of good about our parliamentary system is that we do get mavericks. We do get people who the party doesn't necessarily agree with on everything. But what you have to do is you have to have a balancing act between your own conscience, the political party, and what their constituents say. And it means that you don't get. I mean, when you go to other countries, you can see that the politicians all tend to be a bit the same, and you certainly can't say that about British politics.
Mark, very quickly.
Well, we always get disagreements with everything that we do in this country. Doesn't matter who's elected at the end of the day. But my personal point of view is that if we was to all vote for a particular party, whether it be locally or general, if we all vote for a particular party, what we're doing is we're listening to the people that are telling us what they want to do for our country, and we are voting for those people for our country, whether they're first across the post in a local area is irrelevant.
All right, Mark, thank you very much indeed. Peter in Bexley says, would Emily tell the people of Scotland that first past the post is fair? Reference to the SNP there. But answer that as well. But Emily, you aren't with us for too much longer. How do you expect Labour to do tonight in the county council elections?
I think that, well, it's too, obviously, it's difficult to know. I mean, what we have to bear in mind is that these are a series of different elections. The mayoral elections will be different to the county elections. We'll have different considerations in Scotland and Wales. So it's hard for me to say a blanket how we'll do across the whole of the country.
Do you expect to make gains?
I think we may do in some areas, but I think that we do need to bear in mind that as a general principle, these elections come after the 2012 results, where in Wales, I think we had done better there than we had done for 16 years. So, and there are councils there that weren't Labour in 2008 and have been Labour since. So we'll see how we do. So the watermark is very high.
But in the middle of a Conservative government, in mid-term, it is generally accepted, and if you look throughout history, this has happened, the opposition party ought to be making lots of gains on a night like tonight, but you don't sound as if you're expecting lots of gains. All the pundits seem to be saying that Labour's going to lose seats.
Well, it's a bit of a moot point, isn't it, as to whether or not we're in the middle of a Conservative period, because we've just had 2 years, we've had 2 Prime Ministers, we've had a second Prime Minister who claims to be taking the country in a different direction to the previous Prime Minister. So in some ways, over 2 years, we've had 2 different Prime Ministers, and the current Prime Minister is trying to have a general election on the basis of it being a presidential system when she's only been Prime Minister for a relatively short period of time, is untested, and we don't really know what she stands for.
And that's a fair point, isn't it, Michael Gove? Because this is becoming, we're straying onto the general election now, but why not? Apparently Conservative candidates are using the words Theresa May rather than Conservative. This is becoming a presidential election, isn't it?
No, it's emphatically not a presidential election.
No, come on.
But it's inescapably a choice of Prime Minister.
I can sense a strong and stable coming on.
Yes.
No. Ultimately, there can only be 2 outcomes at the end of this general election. You can either have Theresa May as Prime Minister, or you can have Jeremy Corbyn at the head of a ragtag and bobtail assemblage.
Chaos.
Thank you. I hadn't heard that phrase myself before. But that sums it up perfectly. A coalition of chaos. I will use that in future.
You have an extremely wide vocabulary. Shame on you.
It will be a chaotic galère of Scottish nationalists, Liberal Democrats, Corbynites and Blairites all together. That's the only way in which Jeremy Corbyn could be in number 10. But he could be in number 10 if people don't vote Conservative.
Okay, 2 things. Firstly, it is a matter of fact that the posters, the leaflets, and everything else do not mention Conservative. They just simply say Theresa May,
mention Jeremy
and
Corbyn,
it's in
do
blue.
they?
And the second thing, which is a fact, is that this is a general election. And in a general election, it is for the public to decide what government they want. A third fact, it'll either be a Conservative government or a Labour government, and it's for the people to decide. And frankly, I've met an awful lot of people who are fed up with being told that there is a result already when there is not.
But why is it that
I agree with the 2 of those 3 things.
Why is it that on Conservative leaflets they're trumpeting Theresa May to their heart's content, whereas on Labour leaflets it's very difficult to spot Jeremy Corbyn?
What's so interesting is that they have obviously decided that the Conservative Party per se is toxic, and they're not using the word Conservative on their leaflets.
And Jeremy Corbyn,
they are simply
therefore
saying
the logic is he's toxic.
One of your campaigners for the local elections has described Jeremy Corbyn on the doorstep as radioactive. Ironically,
well, we have 600,000 members. What can I tell you? 600,000 voices. It may be that some people have that view. So one person saying that they believe that about Jeremy, but the truth is that the Labour Party has a different style, and what we do is we do things collectively and we do things in teams. And certainly we would not be running any sort of presidential election at the moment. We would be running it as a
It's been presidential for years. I mean, the last 4 or 5 general elections have been presidential. You speak to voters, they haven't got a clue who their MP is. They couldn't name half the cabinet. They just know who the party leaders are, and they're voting for or against them. And it's been that for years.
When you were UKIP leader, no one else knew who anybody else was in UKIP apart from you. You were a presidential figure.
Believe you me, when you see polling of well-known cabinet members and you find that 6% of the public can actually name them, you realise how things have changed. We've got a presidential system, and Theresa May's using that to her advantage.
Quick call from Chris in Twickenham before we get to the news headlines. Chris, hello there.
Hi, Sheila. Yeah, so a couple of things. I think in terms of the voting system, I never thought I'd agree with Nigel Farage on there, but actually I agree with him on proportional representation. I guess being a Lib Dem, I think it's always been our party policy. All it does under the current system is encourage people to not bother to campaign. Michael could sit there with his feet up in the Caribbean for a month and probably still get elected. And same with some Labour seats up north.
There's an idea.
Good idea, absolutely.
Whereas I'm in Twickenham, you will see, both the main candidates who are likely to win, Lib Dem or Conservative, literally counting and going for every single vote there is. And it also, and I think.
Well, hang on a second, because if we were talking this time before 2015, Vince Cable had a majority there of 15,000, and everyone thought that was a safe seat. So, of course, it proved not to be. I don't think in modern-day politics there's really that many safe seats left.
I would disagree with that. Look at the seat has changed hands since the 1970s. It's been Conservative, then it was Lib Dem, Conservative.
No, but if something has a 15,000 majority, you kind of think it's safe.
Yeah, but people were still campaigning. We were campaigning. We were campaigning for Vince until the last minute. So I would disagree with that. The result might have been unexpected, but there are plenty of seats in this country, especially in Surrey, where I grew up, which are, you could put a gorilla up with a blue rosette, and they would still vote. It would still be Conservative.
Enough of Michael Gove, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. That's Chris in Twickenham there. 0345.
I'm not a gorilla, I'm a pussycat.
Okay. 0345 6060 973. There's a joke there somewhere if you look hard enough. We will be coming to more of your calls, more with Michael. I don't know if Emily has to go right now or whether she can stay for a few more minutes. And Nigel Farage is here with us too. Let's go to the news headlines. It's 10:30. Charles Rose here. It's 10:33 here on LBC. You're listening to Ian Dale and Sheila Fogarty. It's LBC election results live programme. No results yet, but you wouldn't expect them after 34 minutes of counting. But there often are some wards that come in, shall we say, in 10, 15, 20 minutes' time. So we'll try and look at those and see whether we can discern any trends at all. Now, if you'd like to watch us, you can do so on Facebook Live. Why is that funny, Sheila Fogarty?
Well, because I'm still a radio presenter who can't quite get used to the fact that actually it's telly.
This is a TV studio,
it's telly
really, isn't
these
it?
days.
14
and
cameras
once
in
again,
here.
Nigel Farage is the smartest man in the room, and we're all in our scruffs. Well, speaking for
Speak for
myself.
yourself, honestly. Now, we're taking your calls. We want to know how you voted in the local elections, assuming that you did. I've been tweeting all day, urging people to go out and vote. Don't care how you voted, but why on earth wouldn't you want to vote in any kind of election? It's your democratic right to do so. If you're brave enough, give me a call and tell me why you didn't bother to go and vote, but be prepared for a fairly testy reply.
Do you think, a question to all of you, that a couple of things, that the turnout will be low because the general election is hovering over the horizon, and that people will have voted? It would be interesting to find out once people start calling in on this, whether people have voted, as you asked earlier on, Ian, with that election in mind, or with today's elections in mind.
Well, maybe that lady in Bristol got it right. Kay Burley interviewed her. How do you feel about the general election? Oh, not another election. I mean, in many parts of the country, people were asked to vote in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, and now in large parts of England, Scotland and Wales, twice within a month.
Brenda.
So maybe Brenda was her name.
Yeah.
So maybe people have actually just had enough of being asked to go out to vote.
Well, it's hardly a great difficulty, is it, to get up off your bottom and go down to the polling station and register a vote? Surely that's what we're all there to do as citizens. With us also Michael Gove and Emily Thornberry. Emily, what have you found when you've been out on the doorstep in these local elections? Is there just general apathy?
There is a bit. I think there is a bit. And then when you get people engaged, they actually do want to talk about local issues and whether or not this election will have anything to do with their local issues. And the question is kind of getting those two things connected, particularly when there's all this publicity about a general election. So they know the general election isn't today and all the publicity is about that. So that's the main event. And I think there is a problem about connecting people with today is a local election. And actually, it's important because it is about services that are provided for you.
In a way, I mean, I know I'm harking back a bit to the Metro Mayor question and the methods of voting question as well, but aren't they two attempts at least? One's a reality, one isn't, to engage people differently, engage people in a different way, using different methods with their democracy.
I understand the thinking behind it, and I applaud that. I think the reason I have reservations about it is because I do think that politics is about more than just one person. I think that politics is about the relationship that you build up with a group of people, and you can't have proper government with just one person. I mean, you can't. It has to be a group thing, and I think people need to be kind of aware of that.
And even Donald Trump has found that out this evening,
and even
he,
Donald Trump. And I think the other problem is that if it ends up being focusing on who has the most shiny shoes or the best coloured tie or the best hair, then it isn't about what really changes people's lives. So if it's about one personality versus another personality, that in a strange way disenfranchises people.
But leadership matters, doesn't it? And people do seek a figurehead of some sort. They can still have a team, but they need a figurehead.
I think that's right, but I think that it is also about policies. And I think that if you have a system which is focused on a mayor, then it tends to be focused on personalities. And so it's, do I like this person more than that person, as opposed to focusing on policies and the differences.
Many people are pointing out that the Facebook Live pictures aren't working at the moment. We are looking into that. Hopefully that'll be fixed in a moment so you can see us all in our glory. Michael Gove, what's success for the Conservatives tonight?
Well, I think success is holding on to those county councils that we secured 4 years ago, and also I hope winning the West Midland mayoral race. But at this stage, it's important to recognise, exactly as Emily pointed out, that
Please stop doing this.
But Emily,
You're really undermining my credibility here.
Not at all. I speak as I find. And I find that you've said a number of very, well, to me, very sensible things. One of the most powerful and sensible things that you said.
Coalition of chaos?
I can be strong and Emily can be stable.
You sound like a pair of spinster sisters.
Yes. But the one thing I would say after that is that local elections are driven to a greater extent than many imagine by local issues. And I was in a particular part of the country, which I will not name, earlier today. Let's just call it, for the sake of argument, Surrey. And while I was there campaigning, it was striking that the first thing that people mentioned, even though they knew the general election was looming, were the state of roads, or how we were going to pay for social care, or education funding and what its future would be. All responsibilities of the county council, which was up for election.
Oh, wait a minute. No, it isn't. The point, all you've done, all the Conservatives have done, is when you talk about devolution, you just devolve responsibility. But actually, you hold on to the purse strings. So local authorities are getting cut to billio, which means that it's really difficult for them to pay for social care. And as for school funding, the fact is that national government gives the money to local authorities to pay for school funding and directly to schools for school funding. And then, local people take the can when people turn around and go, why is it that we have less funding for schools? That's what they complain about. Those poor local councillors are doing their absolute utmost to try and get, a quart out of a pint pot. And it's impossible because national government is pressing austerity on local authorities in a way which is almost impossible for them to be able to cope with. Lancashire Council has got which one is it? PricewaterhouseCoopers came in and did an independent audit of how much money they had. And Pricewaterhouse said that if they were to provide the services that they have to provide by law, then they would go bankrupt in 2 years. Now, that's the reality now. Who's going to get the blame? Lancashire Council will get the blame, even though it's the government's fault for not giving them enough money.
Emily, where's the extra money going to come from in order to pay for all the wonderful things you're talking about? I know that you want to pay police officers £30 a year in order to do their job, or is it 80? I don't know after yesterday's interview with, the day before's interview with Nick Ferrari. Where is the extra money going to come from?
£2.7 billion that you're giving to the richest people, cutting CGT is certainly one thing. That's capital gains tax is certainly one thing.
You spent
that's
that 12 times already.
No, we haven't, and you will see when we get when we put out our manifesto.
You spent it on police officers. You spent it on education. You spent it on social care.
It will be costed line by line, and what we will do is we will ask for the Office of Budget Responsibility to look at the Office of Budget Responsibility to look at our manifesto and your manifesto, and it'll be up to you to decide if we're allowed to do that.
Okay, hang on.
We'll have a general
Quickly,
election
Nigel.
where the Labour Party say that the government are cutting everything. We'll have a Conservative government saying they're being prudent, and the national debt has more than doubled since 2010. And we won't even discuss it in the general election.
But on that question of social care, which I think local or national election, whichever one you're talking about, is an absolutely vital one for so many families, because if you're not old, you probably will be one day, or you have a loved one who is elderly or heading that way. Theresa May, Michael Gove said in an interview last Sunday that in the manifesto there will be detail of the strategy for adult social care in this country. Will it involve more money? Is that an inevitability?
I think it will necessarily. I think the National Health Service and social care together will have to have more money spent on them in the future. Money itself is not the only answer. There needs to be some reform, some better alignment of the two workforces in the NHS and in social care.
And it has to be better than the Better Care Fund, which was just robbing Peter to pay Paul, was it not?
I wouldn't necessarily say it was robbing Peter to pay Paul, but I do think that if we look 5 years ahead, we as a nation will be spending more on health and social care.
Can I bring you the joyous news that the cameras are back on? Facebook Live is working. Michael
Smile,
Gove
everyone.
You're on screen at the moment, Sheila.
What can
you
I
can go
say?
to LBC's Facebook page. If you've never looked at Facebook Live, it is a marvellous thing. It's like watching us on television, isn't it? And Nigel has this on his show all
I
the
use
time.
it every evening, yeah. Goodness knows why anybody would want to watch radio on Facebook Live.
That's not
but
the
they
message.
do.
You're off
They
message,
do.
Nigel, as usual.
They do.
Let's
They do.
hope-
I know. I'm not very disciplined.
Let's hope Viran in Bristol can help us. Viran, you didn't vote today. Why not?
Simply because of some of the conversations you're having around austerity and the fact that the Metro Mayor can't do anything for us once they're voted in, to be honest. And that's why I didn't vote today. I posted a video on YouTube and I said I'm not voting because of these reasons.
God, you must have been so proud of doing that. I mean, why didn't you go down to the polling station and spoil your ballot paper? At least you'd have got off your bottom and done something.
I did. I went down there.
Oh, right, okay.
I got there and I said, "Can I take my card with me?" They said no. I said, "Hold on, why's that?" So I got into a nice little argument.
Your
with
card? What do you mean?
What my voting card?
Yeah.
My ballot paper. I took it back home and I made a video online and I gave my reasons why I didn't vote. And it's quite simple that none of the people can deliver their manifesto. What they've written up is quite obvious. You know, the austerity's killed off any chance of anyone delivering anything, even the Conservatives or Labour or anybody. And there's no plans nationally from those parties. Labour say it's the anti-austerity anti-austerity party. They should have a manifesto in waiting. They should be ready, tackling any austerity issues. But they've been too busy infighting. All the politicians are having nice little chats, but not looking at what people want in their area.
Viran, would you stand yourself locally? Because I often think that we can easily complain about our local politics and our national politics, but would you consider standing as a councillor?
I was asked by the mayor of Bristol, who loves to put in the Tory cuts, who's a Labour MP, to stand. And I said, no, I'm not going to stand. I've got various personal issues why I'm not standing.
Okay.
And I've put that into context. But standing with £30 million and you can't deliver on a manifesto is not right. Right now I believe in a massive civil rights movement around economic issues, because that's where we are in this country, and it's not a joke.
OK, Viran, thank you very much indeed for that. On a similar line, Mitch in North London says, I'm a Conservative voter who for 30 years has lived in a constituency where only Labour or the Lib Dems can win, neither of whom I would trust to run a Welkstall. So please explain why I should bother voting. Well, if everyone had that attitude, Mitch, no seats would ever change hands. Just because you live in what is apparently a safe seat at the moment does not mean that it will be a safe seat for time immemorial. Although it does, of course, if everyone acts like you, is what I would say.
But 2/3 of seats are safe. 2/3 of seats don't change at general elections. Yeah, you get the odd freak result, but there are millions of people feeling like that. And actually, I genuinely believe there is now an appetite in this country for electoral reform. I really do.
0345 6060 973 is the number to call. How did you vote? Did you vote? And did you vote with the general election in mind or on local issues? You can text us 84850. And don't forget, we are on Facebook Live, although it does go blank during the break, so you can't, I'm afraid, watch what we're doing during the breaks probably just as well.
You should see it.
Indeed. Emily Thornbury, I think we're going to release you now because I know you've got a busy morning tomorrow, so you probably want to put your nightie on, but not till you get home, if you don't mind.
TMI.
Can I put it on during the break?
Thank you very much indeed. In a moment, we're going to be joined by our elections analyst, Gareth Knight, and he'll take us through what are the main things to look for over the course of the next 6 hours.
And he's wearing a nightie as well.
He is indeed. Yeah. This is LBC. It's 10:46. It's 11 minutes to 11 here on LBC. No results yet, but you never know. We might get a few in the next few minutes. But they will be from individual wards, not complete councils. So they would just give us a little indication, maybe, of some trends. If a particular party starts losing seats that you'd think they ought to be either keeping or maybe not winning seats that they ought to be winning, that will maybe give us an indication of what happens throughout the rest of the evening. Emily Thornbury has now left us. Michael Gove from the Conservatives, Nigel Farage from UKIP is still. They are still with us, and we're also joined by Gareth Knight, our LBC elections analyst in the studio. He joins us for these evenings, sort of whenever we do them.
For his sins.
And Andrew Gwynn joins us. He is Labour's elections coordinator. Andrew, very good evening to you. Well, I thought he was joining us. He's clearly not joining us.
He will at some point.
Andrew,
I am here.
You are there.
Hear me?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Andrew.
Yeah.
Now, let me start off with you. What are you expecting from tonight? Because 2012, was it 2012 when these elections were last? 2013, I think, wasn't it? In the county councils, they were relatively good for Labour. But do you think you're expecting better results tonight?
Well, I think it's going to be a mixed picture because, of course, there isn't a single baseline for these elections. You're absolutely right. The last time that the county council elections were fought were in 2013. But, of course, Scotland and Wales were last fought in 2012. So you've got very different baselines in different parts of the country. And then, of course, we've also got the metro mayoral elections, which are the first time they've been contested.
And I suppose everyone's going to expect Andy Burnham to win in Greater Manchester. They're going to expect Steve Rotherham to win in Liverpool. But what are you expecting from the West Midlands region, where Sean Simon, your candidate, has been in a real pitched battle with Andy Street, the Conservative?
Well, these mayoral elections are all going to be very different contests, I think, with no uniform picture. This is the first time, as I say, that they've been fought, and everything that we do know about these battles suggests that some of them will be very close.
Now, if you're watching on Facebook Live, you will have seen that Andrew Gwynn is not with us in the studio, even though he sounds as if he is. He's joining us from... where are you?
I'm in Sky
You're
News.
In Sky News in Osterley. So you're going to be with us for some time. So chip in whenever you like, Andrew, and we'll try and bring you into the conversation. Michael Gove is here as well. Are you confident, Michael, that your candidate is going to put in a good showing in the West Midlands?
I think he already has. I think whatever the result of the West Midlands, Andy Street has made sure that this has been a very competitive race. He's put forward an exciting programme of ideas for the way in which this new role can actually bring a degree of strategic coherence to the way in which the West Midlands is governed.
He's a very able communicator, actually. In my years of interviewing many people, chief executives and the like, he was always an interesting listen, which serves anybody well in politics, doesn't it?
Yeah, John Lewis is, I'm a fan, but it is also Britain's #1 most successful retailer at the moment, and it occupies that position thanks to the leadership that he's shown. And I think that if he does the same for the West Midlands as he's done for John Lewis and Waitrose, then he'll do an excellent job.
And John Lewis is known for a number of things, isn't it? Never knowingly undersold.
Yes.
And the partnership model of employment.
Exactly.
Now, Theresa May says a lot, and she said it just again in her speech or her statement, whatever you want to call it, declaration outside Number 10, that it will be a nation for everybody, a country for everybody. It doesn't feel like a partnership to a lot of people. You know that. She knows that.
I think it's certainly the case that Theresa recognises that in the past the Conservative Party has been seen as not in tune with and not fully in sympathy with every part of the country. We have been seen as a party that's been stronger in the south than in the north, that's been perhaps better at representing the interests of the middle classes who already have property rather than those people who aspire to a better life for themselves and their children. I think it's been dramatic the way in which that's changed under Theresa, and over the course of the last 10 months we've seen that her appeal extends far beyond those areas that people would have thought of as traditionally Tory.
We have, and in the calls that I take day in, day out, and certainly in recent weeks since the election was announced, you hear that. You hear people saying, I voted Labour, I'm going to vote Tory, I can't vote Labour again, or I cannot vote Tory again. And often the reasons people are saying I can't vote Tory again, it goes further than the regional history that you've described. And actually, I'm hearing the word cruelty, particularly in relation to disability benefits. So, and respond to that.
Well, I think
cruelty, that's a big word.
It is. And I think any government that had been in power over the last 6 years, or any party that had been in government over the last 6 years, would inevitably have faced criticism for having to reform the welfare budget and reduce public expenditure overall. But I don't think there's anyone who thinks that Theresa, someone who, when she was at the Home Office, had as one of her first concerns improving the condition of people suffering from mental illness who come into contact with the criminal justice system. I don't think anyone can look at Theresa and think that. They'll think she's a strong leader, but they'll also think that strength is married with compassion.
Now, Kate has texted to say, I'm really nervous that I might have missed voting. Did Wandsworth Council come up for election today? I didn't receive a voting card. Well, the man to answer that is Gareth Knight. He's LBC's elections analyst. He's going to be taking us through some of what's going to be happening over the next few hours. Kate doesn't need to worry, does she?
No, there's no elections in London whatsoever, unless there's a local by-election, but no. Most of the elections in England are actually in county councils. There's a few unitary authorities as well, but effectively, as a rule, if you're in a city, you're probably not voting. If you're in a suburban area or a small town, you probably are. If you're in Scotland or Wales, you're definitely voting.
And in terms of the county council elections, Andrew Gwynn there was mentioning that sort of county councils can be sort of a bit of a mixed bag for Labour because they are generally rural areas, more associated with Conservative voting areas. So can Labour really do very well tonight, in your opinion? What should we expect from Labour? What should we expect from the Conservatives over the next few hours?
OK, we're going to try and cut through a lot of the spin over the next few hours, but Emily Thornberry a moment ago was saying, these are not really midterm elections. They are by definition midterm elections. And if we look at 2013 or 2012, Ed Miliband made huge gains. I mean, in 2013 in county councils, he made 291 gains. So Emily Thornberry really should be looking at repeating a similar thing if she believes that this
extra
is extra
gains on top of those.
Well, if we're going to treat these as midterm elections and the Labour Party is looking at forming a government, then yes. Equally, however, Michael is, without question, going to tell you that 100 Conservative gains will probably be a very good result. The Conservatives lost 335 seats in 2013, so in reality, at the minimum, you want to be getting those back. So a net gain of 335 minimum just to get back to where you were in 2013. Nigel, however, is going to be very concerned about his 139 UKIP gains that he got in 2013. Now, it is different. I'm going to be fair on Nigel. It is going to be difficult for that to change because we've had a referendum since then. But if anything, that actually gives Michael more opportunities to make more gains. And I actually think a good night for the Conservatives, a genuinely good night, you're looking at plus 400 county council seats.
Andrew Gwynn, Labour's elections coordinator, let's bring you in there. Would you take issue with what Gareth said there?
I think his analysis is actually quite right. I think if you look at the exact correlation with the last time the shires and the 8 unitaries that are up for election today in England, Labour's share of the vote was around 29%. So we would be looking at polling similar to that if the national opinion polls are currently correct. Of course, the difficulty for us is what happens to the 23% that UKIP polled back in 2013, and where does that vote go for? And certainly, if the national opinion polls are to believe, the Conservatives should be picking up at UKIP's expense.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more in a second. Let's take a quick call from Christian, who's in Cambridge. Christian, hello.
Sorry, a long-time listener, first-time caller. So
well, welcome to the show, Christian. What would you like to say?
Strange time of night to call for the first time, but you're very welcome.
I just wanted to go to Mitch's point just before your last break, just about how disenfranchised people are by first past the post, especially talking about general elections. Even party political candidates and MPs standing for re-election, they almost always talk about national issues. So to divvy it up by sort of local constituencies, it just means that the vast majority of voters are disenfranchised and don't get what they want.
Well, hang on a minute. You live in Cambridge, which is always a marginal seat. How can anyone be disenfranchised in Cambridge?
Well, if you're a UKIP supporter, maybe.
Well, that may be true, yes. I suppose Nigel's looking a bit forlorn at that thought.
Well, all I can say is that for every single Tory MP over the last 2 years, there were 33,000 voters, and for UKIP it was 3.9 million voters for one MP, who wasn't really one of ours anyway. So I do feel a bit bitter about the system, yes.
Let's not go there. Christian, thank you very much indeed for making your first-time call to LBC. Right, coming up in the next hour, we hope to get a few results over the course of the next 60 minutes, but will they cheer Andrew Gwynn up, or will we see Michael Gove grinning like a pussycat? That's what he says he was, anyway, in animal terms. Goodness knows what Nigel Farage is in animal terms. Will UKIP be able to hold on to their 146 seats? And we're going to be hopefully getting some of the results from the mayoral elections much later in the night. A lot of those are actually counting tomorrow. We've got all the elections in Scotland and Wales. We will be getting a lot of the Welsh results tonight. They're going to be very interesting. They will give us a very good indication as to what might happen in Wales in the general election. Remember, in Wales, 64% of UKIP voters say they're going to vote Tory in the general election.
Well, it's the night time, isn't it? It's nearly the middle of the night. We're on till 4 in the morning, Ian Dale and myself, bringing you as many election results as come in overnight from Wales. I think are going to be the first to come in. We'll hear from Scotland. The Tory heartlands will be of particular interest to Michael Gove from the Conservatives, who's with us. Andrew Gwynn from Labour is with us as well. Nigel Farage, UKIP MEP, will join us again shortly. And with us as well is Gareth Knight, election analyst. Do you want to just trot us through the points in the evening that we can expect some of the significant results to come in?
Yeah, so first results expected around about 2 o'clock. We've got to remember these are local elections, and because they're county council elections, generally being counted in one place, in some cases it's going to take over an hour for ballot boxes to arrive at the counting halls. And in fact, in Northumberland, one ballot box can't get from Holy Island down to Morpeth until gone 1:30 when the causeway opens. So it's stuck there. So
that's a rather elegant reason, isn't it, for a late count?
Yeah, I mean, you often get these romantic stories of boats with ballot boxes being transported across the Scottish Islands. The reality is that there's a car literally going to be sitting there at the causeway, hoping it gets over. So the earliest we expect any results of entire councils is around about 2 o'clock. We're expecting the Isle of Wight and Swansea, shortly followed by Wrexham. There's nothing particularly interesting about those. In Swansea, there's a bit of interest, see if there's a Lib Dem revival, but there's no sort of marginal seats in those immediate areas.
Well, hang on a second. Wrexham, in parliamentary terms, it ought not to be a marginal seat, but in this election, if you look at the ITV Wales opinion poll, Wrexham is firmly in play as a marginal seat.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to read too much into the local elections into the general, because the fact is that...
That's what we were here for.
Oh, yeah, it is. It is, but
we're going to read all kinds into it.
If we translate them too much, you should see Labour performing better in the locals than we would necessarily expect in the generals, and this is the trend that we should be seeing.
And can I just reassure some callers and texters and tweeters about the Lib Dems? We are not ignoring the Lib Dems. Simon Hughes will join us for the Liberal Democrats shortly. We'll have a Lib Dem peer with us as well. But the Lib Dems in Cardiff will want to take back control there, won't they, with support of Remain voters.
Yeah, this is a big test of the Lib Dems' strategy to appeal to the 48%, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, Cardiff has always been a little bit of an unpredictable beast when it comes to elections, and Cardiff has what is now considered to be a fairly safe Conservative seat in Cardiff North, which only 2 years ago was considered to be an extremely vulnerable Conservative seat. And the Liberal Democrats have always been strong in that area, and it will be interesting to see what happens there. the fact is that Wales is not a particularly Remainy area. It's not like southwest London. Wales actually, by and large, goes with the trend, the national trend. Everyone seems to put Wales in the same category as Scotland when it comes to election results. In reality, that's just not the case. As much as Welsh people, and I'm quarter Welsh myself, would not appreciate being grouped with England, they're more like England than Scotland.
Well, speaking of Scotland, we are joined by former First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond. Alex, good evening.
How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Now, Scotland is, I think, counting tomorrow.
That's right. I'm going to bed.
Well, we thought we'd better get you early. What are you expecting tomorrow? I mean, obviously, you're going to tell me that the SNP are doing well, but what parts of Scotland should we be looking out for?
Well, I think two big prizes for the SNP potentially tomorrow. One is Glasgow for historic reasons. Generations of Labour control. Even in 2012, when we outpolled Labour across Scotland, we couldn't get near them in Glasgow. Now, the parliamentary results from last year and the year before would tell you that we've got a big chance. So looking for control in Glasgow, that would be a huge thing. And secondly, up here in the northeast is Aberdeen. We've got high hopes of capturing control of the Northern Lights and Aberdeen. And these two prizes, different ends of the country, it would be big news for the SNP tomorrow.
Andrew Gwynn, what do you say to Alex Salmond? Because, of course, Labour has traditionally been all-powerful in Glasgow. Are you expecting to hold on to that council?
Well, of course, some of the viewers earlier were saying that one of the things that they decried was the fact that there weren't proportional representation in local elections. Of course, in Scotland, they have single transferable vote, so it's going to be very difficult for Labour to match anything like its performance in 2012 when we polled 31.4% of the vote and therefore got around about that share of the seats, and that just isn't going to happen tonight.
But the polls are showing you at 14 to 18% in Scotland now, so you're accepting that you're going to lose Glasgow?
There are going to be a very difficult set of results in Scotland because of the nature of the voting system there.
But does that mean you accept that you'll lose Glasgow?
Well, we'll have to wait and see how the votes tally, but I imagine it will be a very difficult set of results in Scotland.
That's kind of a yes, isn't it? Kind of.
Well, I'm not at the count, so, but all I can say is that if the people of Scotland have voted in line with the national opinion polls, it's going to be a difficult night for Labour north of the border.
Alex Salmond, put your sort of pundit's hat on and take your SNP hat off, if that's possible.
Done already, Ian.
OK, fantastic. How are the Tories going to do?
Well, I think, let's take it this way. If you take the figures 2, 3, 4, right? The SNP will be really pleased if their first preference votes, because this is a proportional system, reach 40%. The Tories will be really pleased if their first preference votes reach 30%, and Labour will be delighted if their first preference votes reach 20%. So I think you'll be able to judge the election on a 2, 3, 4 basis. 2 for Labour, 3 for the Tories and 4 for the SNP.
And Michael Gove, in a way, all eyes are going to be on whether the Conservatives have been right to boast about that Scottish revival, won't they?
Well, the Scottish revival took place last year in the Scottish parliamentary elections, where Alex's successor as First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, mislaid Alex's majority. She doesn't have a majority there. And Ruth Davidson emerged as the most popular politician in Scotland. And I think that we'll see in these local elections the Scottish Conservatives making some progress. I take Alex's point about Aberdeen. I think the SNP have one fewer councillor at the moment than Labour in Aberdeen. So leapfrogging them, that's entirely within the bounds of possibility. But at the general election, there'll be a straightforward choice. If you vote for Alex and his colleagues, then you'll be voting for a party that could contribute to Jeremy Corbyn getting into Downing Street. If you vote for the Scottish Conservatives, then you'll be certain that you'll have Theresa May in Downing Street, providing the strong and stable leadership that the majority of people in the United Kingdom want to see.
You were doing so well, weren't you?
We need a klaxon. Or a cattle prod.
No, I said to a Tory MP the other day, every time she says that, we're going to start a drinking game.
And that sounds fun.
Risky strategy.
And Andrew Gwynn, you've been quite good so far, because you haven't mentioned "For the Many, Not the Few," which I always thought was a Tony Blair slogan.
Although that sounds like a good drinking game as well, doesn't it? For the many, not the few.
Indeed it does. Nigel Farage, you've got a glass of water in your hand, which is highly unusual. What in Scotland? Why hasn't UKIP ever done anything in Scotland?
We've never got off the ground. I mean, we've won an MEP seat. We've never got off the ground. I think because the word independence meant something different in Scotland. Independence in Scotland meant separating from the rest of the United Kingdom. And really, the European debate has been very late to Scotland. The rest of the UK was talking about the EU issue. Scotland did begin to talk about it during the referendum, and interestingly, it poses the SNP a really serious problem, because a third of SNP voters are genuine nationalists in that they want Scotland to be an independent country. So ultimately, I think that in the end, the fanatical pro-Europeanism of Salmond and of Sturgeon, in the end, is what's seeing their decline.
Nigel, thank you. Omar is in Camden, wants to have a word. Hello, Omar.
Hi there, you know.
What would you like to say?
You guys were talking about sort of the reasons why people aren't going out to vote. I have this argument a lot with my friends, co-workers, and family, and two key demographics that sort of pop up to me that vote less than any other group would be definitely the young, and just finishing college now, me being at university. I can't actually specifically think of any period of my educational history where sort of we learned about the process of voting, about who you could identify with and how to read a manifesto or anything like that. I'd say it's definitely due to a lack of education.
I mean, that's appalling, isn't it? Why aren't these things... Former Education Secretary Michael Gove, is it your fault?
Almost certainly.
Yeah, Michael Gove, I just wanted to say as well, you're not very liked at my school, by the way.
Which is your school, Omar? I'll have a word with Ofsted.
Well, you can't have it closed down now. He's not Education Secretary. But, I mean, in all seriousness, I think Omar raises a very good point, because if throughout the country people aren't being taught about the political system and democratic responsibilities, we can't be surprised if young people don't vote.
Entirely seriously, citizenship is a national curriculum subject, and citizenship should teach you about the institutions of this country, how to vote, how to play a part. And indeed, our revised history curriculum explains the evolution of our system of government. So, Omar, do let me know, privately or publicly, which your school is, because if they're not teaching you citizenship, they're not following the national curriculum.
We had citizenship and PSHE. We had those things, but it was never really a set curriculum or a set of exams at the end of our GCSEs or whatever that would test us on specifically the sort of political skills that we need in our lives here in Britain.
Which was your school, Omar?
I'm not going to say that on air. I'm an embarrassment on that.
It's the one that you're very unpopular at, Michael. That's his school. Incidentally,
just one point. I think it's significant that Omar is telling us that even though a subject was on the national curriculum, it was so poorly taught that he wasn't told about our democratic institutions, and he can't now say which the school is. It's only if we know what's going wrong in our education system that we can put it right.
Well, Omar, email me the name of the school and I'll pass it on to Michael.
Pass on to Michael, but I was going to say there's another difference in Scotland, apart from running an STV system in this election, a proportional system for local government. And that, of course, is that 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland are able to vote in this election. It's not just having classes in school, Michael. They actually get to exercise their democratic right, which was a huge success in the referendum campaign of 2014, a huge success in the Scottish elections of last year, and I suspect 16 and 17-year-olds will vote in substantial number. And perhaps if you'd done something like that when you were in power, Michael, you might be more popular in Omar's school.
Well, who's to say what changing the franchise might have done? But one of the things that we have seen over the course of the last 6 years is that, sadly, the Scottish education system, which produced you and me, Alex, has fallen behind the English education system. And the real tragedy is not that 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland have the vote and 16 and 17-year-olds in England don't have the vote. It's that 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland are leaving schools that are falling behind England.
You're talking nonsense. I mean, the PISA rankings which are going on, I mean, there's nothing between Scotland and England in the PISA rankings. What I think is significant, though, is that 93% of Scottish kids are now going on to positive destinations. That's to education or work. And that is a real statistic that's really meaningful. The second lowest rate of youth unemployment in Europe, Scotland now has, Michael.
Well, it's good that the SNP are now adopting some of the education policies that we pioneered in England. It's good that the SNP are now introducing tests and league tables which were abandoned in the past. And I'm glad that Nicola Sturgeon has appointed John Swinney to be Education Minister in Scotland, because that's a recognition of the failure of preceding years, a failure which has also seen the gap between rich and poor in Scotland grow.
We'll let you come back to that in a few minutes. Alex Salmon from the SNP, who's one of our guests with us tonight here on LBC. Ian Dale, Sheila Fogarty with you till 4 a.m. this morning, bringing you all the results, which come before 4 anyway, of the local elections taking place in England, Scotland and Wales. Andrew Gwynn from Labour is with us. Michael Gove from the Conservatives, the last voice you just heard there. Nigel Farage, UKIP MEP. Alex Salmon, of course, we heard as well. And Gareth Knight, elections analyst. Want to hear from you very much as well. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Adele has said, what's all this election stuff on LBC tonight? Did I oversleep and wake up on the 8th of June? No, don't panic. Local elections, the general election will have its moment.
And we'll be back then as well.
We will as well. It's 16 minutes past 11.
LBC's Election Night Live. Call 0345 6060 973.
Oh, that advert for Indian food has made us all rather hungry in here. You're joined by LBC until 4 o'clock this morning. We're looking at the election results, bringing as many of them as we can to you before 4. Stay with us after that, of course, as well. Andrew Gwynn is with us from the Labour Party. Michael Gove for the Conservatives. Nigel Farage still with us. UKIP MEP Alex Salmon from the SNP. And we are joined, for those of you concerned that we were ignoring the Lib Dems, Simon Hughes from the Liberal Democrats joins us as well. Good evening to you. Good to see you.
Good evening. I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier, but I was at the Den watching Millwall.
Oh, really?
How did they do?
That's a way to endear yourself to the West Ham supporting presenter, isn't it?
It was very tough, very lively game, but it was a 0-0 draw.
So, are you used to the slogan, no one likes us and we don't care?
I am used to it. In a football context.
I meant in a political context.
Well, I've heard it in both.
And are you a politician that genuinely likes football or pretends to like football?
I come from a big sporting fanatic family.
But Simon, why weren't you out pulling out the vote in some Liberal stronghold somewhere or other? As opposed to being at the football. This is a very casual way to look at things.
Coming from you know perfectly well that sometimes we'll have to take other loyalties into account. I've been doing political things all the rest of the day. We don't have local elections in London, as you well know.
But you just go up north.
But we've been helping other colleagues around the country. But I was allowed off for a couple of hours this evening.
Listen, the Lib Dems historically do very well in local elections. It's been where their power base is in many senses historically. Obviously, nationally, not so well in the last general elections. You felt that very personally. What do you hope from these elections?
Obviously, we hope to make progress. When these elections, and I heard the conversation before I came in, when these elections were last fought 4 years ago in England, 5 years ago in Wales and Scotland, we went back. We lost. We were in government and we were being kicked for being in government, and it was a cycle. That's the normal cycle that government parties get kicked.
Well, your current leader said within weeks, I think, of the coalition, this will end in divorce and it will end badly for us. I mean, he predicted it.
Well, as Michael knows, Michael's here. I was one of those who said in the national interest we ought to help to govern the country when Labour lost control and didn't have a majority and there was no coalition possible with them. And I thought it was better that there was a government that could run the country with a majority than a Tory minority government, which was the only alternative. And that was the right decision. However, we got punished. And it's the world over, junior coalition partners often get punished for going into coalition with bigger coalition partners. And we took the punishment. But the answer to your question is, since then, in the local elections we've had, we have been doing very well. Now, by-elections and local elections are not the same as an all-out local election, which is what we're having today. But the signs are that we are picking up and we are hoping to make some progress. How much progress, who knows?
Andrew Gwynn from Labour, you just heard Simon Hughes there accuse your party of leaving the country in chaos. There isn't a lot of love lost between Labour and the Lib Dems, is there?
Absolutely not, and certainly in parts of the country, and the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party are fierce opponents. I mean, I have to take issue with Simon when he says that it was preferable to go into coalition with the Conservatives and they achieved more in coalition than they would have done as if they'd have allowed the Conservatives a minority government, because it was the Liberal Democrat votes that allowed the Conservative-led coalition government to treble tuition fees, introduce the bedroom tax and make those dramatic changes under the Health and Social Care Act. So, can't have it both ways. You are part and parcel of what that government did.
Andrew, of course you take responsibility and you don't get your own way in everything. And if Labour had done better in the 2010 election, then it might have been possible that there would have been a coalition with Labour. But you lost.
But there wasn't a majority for those things if you'd have been in the opposition benches.
Andrew, of course. But in return, we managed, for example, to significantly bring down those on benefit, increase those in work, bring down those unemployed, raise the tax thresholds significantly so that the poorer people paid less tax, put more money into schools, particularly for the most disadvantaged.
And you did so well, you were punished for it.
Well, as I made the point a minute or two ago, that often parties in coalition, junior parties, whatever, whether they're parties of the left, the centre or the right, get punished after a period in government. We inherited a dire economic position. You know that, because that's what was left in 2010. It was far better in 2015.
Can I bring you some exciting news? We have 2 ward results in. These are from Wales. Andrew, you'll be very excited because there's a Labour hold in Queensferry ward in Flintshire. But you might not be excited by this one in Wrexham, which in parliamentary terms is quite a marginal seat now, it seems, in Wales. Independent gain from Labour in a ward that I can't pronounce, called Rossesney or something like that. I do apologise to everyone in Wales for that. So we can't read too much into that, but interesting. Swansea Lib Dems, according to the Britain Elects Twitter feed, are talking of a collapse in the Labour vote in Swansea. Plaid are saying that they're going to go from 0 seats to 3 on Swansea Council. So I don't know what we make of that, Simon Hughes.
Swansea is one of the 4 largest conurbations in Wales. I think there'll be a very interesting set of results in Cardiff, in Newport, and in Swansea, the big 3 cities in the south. I think Labour will be in trouble in all of them. And will go backwards in all of them. I honestly
But hold on, we only took control of Cardiff, Newport and Swansea in 2012. You know, these were new gains that time round.
Yeah, Andrew, I know that. And I'm not certain that there will be continuing control in places like Cardiff after tonight. I know South Wales very well. It is traditionally rock-solid Labour territory. I was brought up there. You know, the majorities were huge parliamentary majorities. Pretty well all the councils in my... I mean, there have been Tory periods in the past, but more recently it has been very strongly Labour. I think Labour in difficulty. How well Plaid do, we will see. Obviously, they haven't done as well traditionally as the SNP. Some independents win seats, but fundamentally... In Cardiff, it's been a 3-way battle in recent years between Labour, the Tories and us. We have run Cardiff, as you know. We have run Swansea in recent years. And we're in contention Newport. So let's see. But I don't think it will be a great night for Labour in South Wales.
Let me just bring in David, a caller. David's called from Aldershot. Hello to you, David.
Hi.
What did you want to say?
Yes, you were asking how people voted. And I wrote on my ballot paper that... that we're spending a fortune on looking after criminals, but virtually nothing on looking after crime victims who develop mental illness, because I happen to be in that category and I know what I'm talking about. And also, there's been several mentions of proportional representation, and Emily Thornberry was talking about the loss of the link of the constituency MP and things like that. Those arguments don't apply to a single transferable vote. And as far as I'm aware, apart from UKIP, where I'm not sure what their policy is, all the parties that want proportional representation want single transferable votes.
Well, let's ask Nigel Farage what his policy is on that.
AV+. I'm going with the Jenkins Commissioner 20 years ago. I think that way you satisfy both requirements, the fact that you know who the man or woman is representing your area, but equally with that second ballot paper, you know going to the polling station it will not be a completely wasted vote.
Andrew Gwynn, we haven't heard from you on proportional representation. We talked about that earlier in the programme. What's your favoured electoral system?
Well, I think certainly first past the post works well for parliamentary votes because that link.
Do you think you'll be saying that on June the 8th?
I hope so. But nevertheless, the point is that people need to know who their representative is, and I think that's really been the disservice of the system that we had for the European elections, where certainly MEPs became far more remote from their electorates as a result of the changes to the voting system.
Ian, there's a bit of consensus here because I didn't know what Nigel's view was, but I've always supported the Jenkins proposal. I don't know what Michael's view is.
He
either,
doesn't.
But the argument, which means you have one representative for your seat, seems to me one that the British would be very reluctant to get rid of. But the benefit of the change of the system that I would wish us to have is that you should be able to put numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in preference for the people in the seat. So in the end, the person who is the most acceptable wins in that seat if somebody doesn't get in.
Alex Salmond, you've experienced both systems in Scotland. Which would you prefer?
All three. I mean, we have, well, there's more than three, I suppose, but we've got three in Scotland. We've got first past the post for the Westminster elections, which the SNP have managed to win. We've got a list system for the Scottish elections, which the SNP have managed to win. And we've got a STV system for the local elections, which the SNP have also managed to win. So, look, I think for parliamentary elections...
Alex, I mean, something I'm sure you'll factually agree with, the SNP managed to win 56 of 59 parliamentary seats. Remind me, I think you got 50% of the vote or something like it.
Which is actually quite...
Which shows the flaw in the system.
Well, I mean, getting 50% of the vote and winning a big majority of seats is actually a rather good result under first past the post. It's when people get a minority, like 37% for David Cameron at the last election, and still end up with a majority of the seats.
Which one of those three systems would you prefer?
List system, Ian, because I think it keeps the single member constituency link, and then balances it with a list. The only change I would advocate from experience in the Scottish Parliament, I would have a national list instead of a regional list. I think a national list is a better way to do things. Otherwise, you get some element of confusion between the duties of the regional list MSP and the constituency MSP. But I think it's the best of the three systems which Scotland currently employs. Oh, and the one last thing I'd say is try not to have elections with two different systems on the same day. Even the
I think we are in this instance, yeah.
Infinite intelligence of the Scottish electorate can be strained when you're putting 1, 2, 3 in one ballot paper and an X in another.
Quick text here from Matt who says, keep first past the post system, reform the House of Lords with single transferable vote as it keeps the best aspects of both the Commons and the Lords while also giving the Lords accountability.
Professor Roger Scully from Cardiff University, he's tweeted, so Labour have lost their first council seat in Wales. It will not be the last one to go tonight. Well, I think all parties are going to lose and gain seats tonight. It just depends in what proportion, I suppose. We'll find out, hopefully, some more results over the course of the next half an hour. 0345 6060 973. Andrew Gwynn from Labour, Nigel Farage from UKIP, Michael Gove from the Conservatives, Simon Hughes from the Lib Dems and Alex Salmond from the SNP. What a stellar panel we have for you tonight. You won't find that quality anywhere else on your radio dial. End of I don't know why you're laughing, Alex. It's true. It's 11:32 here.
This is LBC's Election Night Live with Ian Dale and Sheila Fogarty.
Stay with me, Sheila Fogarty and Ian Dale between now and 4 a.m. here on LBC. You can catch us on Facebook Live as well. Keep your texts coming and your tweets. 84850 to text, at LBC to tweet. You can call as well. We're very keen to speak to you. And if you want to put questions or thoughts to our guests, you can. 0345 6060 973, the number to call as usual. Andrew Gwynn still with us for Labour. Michael Gove from the Conservatives. Nigel Farage, UKIP MEP, with us as well here in the studio at LBC. Alex Salmond from the SNP and Simon Hughes from the Lib Dems.
So we've actually got 4 LBC presenters on air at the same time. That must be some sort of record.
You can't have too many.
No,
I don't think. Well, maybe that's nonsense. Maybe you can. Let's go to Scotland for a few moments and speak to LBC's reporter who's in Glasgow, Corrie Martin. Corrie, a couple of results in already?
Well, counting starts in Scotland tomorrow. We're going to get a clearer picture as the day goes on, and we'll start to really understand how Scotland is looking mid to late afternoon. And then, of course, the work starts over the weekend to decide if there are going to be coalitions. There are a lot of coalition councils in Scotland. For example, Edinburgh's a Labour SNP coalition, but Glasgow is really going to be the eyes-on situation for the country, and it's very much going to be a litmus test for Labour. Glasgow, a Labour stronghold, often referred to as the birthplace of Labour, and they control Glasgow City Council, have done for decades, and were they to lose control to the SNP, it really would be a huge political earthquake, and really underlining how far Labour's fortunes have fallen in Scotland since the independence referendum, were that to be the case.
And we're talking not just about Glasgow there, are we? Because the battle between SNP and Labour is in Inverclyde, Midlothian, East Lothian, Renfrewshire. Alex Salmond, you might want to come in on that.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact, in 2012 the SNP outpolled Labour in the first preference vote, Labour still dominate Scottish local government. I mean, as of this moment, they control or are leading the administration in 17 out of the 32 local authorities. Now, it's possible, it's not a forecast I'm making, but it's entirely possible that as at tomorrow, they won't be in the lead in any administration, in any local authority across Scotland, and that would be a dramatic turn of events.
Andrew Gwynn, what does this do to our politics if Labour's defeat is as big as some are suggesting it will be, not just tonight, but on June the 8th as well?
But without a doubt, this is always going to be a tough election for Labour in Scotland. It's the first local election since the independence referendum, and also following 2012, where we significantly exceeded our own expectations. The binary constitutional debate in British politics as it is now between yes and no in Scotland, Remain and Leave throughout the UK, it's squeezed our vote. Now, I believe Labour is proud to offer an alternative to the SNP and Tories.
But why should it have squeezed your vote rather than anybody else's?
Well, look, Ian, it's where we are in politics.
Well, it's
in
enhanced
Scotland.
the Conservative vote. Sorry, I feel like we're ganging up on you, but that's a point that needs to be made. It's enhanced the Conservative vote in Scotland.
Because what has happened since the referendum in Scotland is that the Labour vote has fragmented between those that have gone to the SNP and those that have gone to the Conservatives as the alternative to the independence movement, and that has left the Labour Party in a very difficult position, and it's going to take some time to recover.
Andrew, Simon here. The thing that people would not understand as an explanation is how when there's a Tory UK government, the principal UK opposition party is not making gains, first question, which normally happens. And secondly, where there is a Scottish SNP government, why the principal opposition party in Scotland, namely Labour, is not making gains. And if you can't make gains when you've got two opposition parties who you're fighting, you're in a bad shape.
We are in a very difficult position in Scotland. There's no hiding from that. You look at the results from the 2015 general election. You look at the impact that has had. The Labour Party is in a process of a long road for recovery.
But do you start the process by going backwards? That sounds an odd way to recover.
We start the process by understanding that that politics has changed in Scotland, and that we have to learn the lessons both from the referendum, but also from the absolute battering that we took in May 2015.
And I think, Simon, your question, do you start by going backwards? I think sometimes in politics isn't the answer to that yes. If you look at the Conservative, and Michael, you might want to come in on this, the Conservative experience during the Blair years was in a sense to go backwards before it went forwards again, and you went through leaders like a dose of salts for a period, didn't you?
Yes, it wasn't a very happy period for the Conservative Party when Tony Blair was Prime Minister, until David Cameron came along. So yes, I sympathise with the position that Andrew finds himself in, that after Ed Miliband, most people would have thought, well, the Labour Party has reached rock bottom, and then unfortunately in Jeremy Corbyn, someone significantly less suitable than Ed Miliband to be Prime Minister became Labour's leader, and that means that decent Labour MPs like Andrew have a tough fight.
Is it about the leader? I mean, Andrew said about it rightly that Labour are suffering because of the independence question, because of the European question. But the difficulty is, Andrew, that you're suffering because you're not trusted on independence, and people are uncertain where you stand on Europe. So on the two, very, very large, the dominant constitutional issues of the day, people either don't trust you or don't know where you stand. And if you don't have a defined position on some of the biggest issues facing the country, whether it's Scotland or the UK, then it is difficult. And I think that's an issue that goes far beyond leadership. That's an issue of whether people are going to connect with you on the big issues
Alex,
facing the country.
thank you very much for that. We'll come to a call in just a second. But Michael Gove, you had a couple of snippets that you were looking at on your phone that you wanted to bring us.
Yes, Michael Savage, the Times political reporter, was pointing out that apparently the news that he's getting on the ground in Wales is similar to the news that you were sharing with us earlier, Ian, that there's been a significant drop in the Labour vote. Also, the Tees Valley mayoral race may be closer than had been thought. Many people had assumed that this would be a shoe-in for Labour, and it's the part of the northeast that takes in places like Darlington, Redcar and Middlesbrough, all Labour heartland areas. But apparently, and this is only, of course, a tweet and only speculation at this stage, but it is the Times, so it's well-informed speculation. Apparently that will be closer than many people thought.
Well, that would be an interesting one. Let's go to Tim, who's in Cardiff, which is obviously a key battleground tonight, but also in the general election. Tim, what would you like to say?
So I was just listening to you talking about different voting systems, and it seems to me that it isn't perfect at the moment by any means. I quite like the first past the post system in the Commons, but it would be really good to get this sort of proportional system working as well. And I just wonder whether there'd be a novel way where you could take the popular vote in a general election and then weight the House of Lords so that each party, everyone can remain in their seats. So whoever's been appointed so far can remain appointed, but each person's vote for a particular bill is weighted dependent on how their party performed. So
it's sort of similar how
the Germans do that in the lower house.
You beat me to it.
Sorry. The Germans have a system where in the lower house, I'll be corrected by Nigel, but 2/3 of the seats are elected as single-member seats, and then you make the lower house proportional by topping them up by party.
And then the second chamber in Germany, I think that is completely proportional.
And that's in relation to the Lander.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to see people elected in the House of Lords because I think that you actually get people going for the post for the wrong reasons. I think it's quite good that the people are appointed.
It's the only way Nigel Farage is going to get there, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting, actually, isn't it? Because David Cameron did say he wanted the House of Lords to be more representative of the way people vote in this country. And despite the fact that Liberal Democrats have been given 100 life peers, UKIP haven't had one. So there we are.
And that is unfair, isn't it, Simon Hughes?
They would need at least one with this system, but that one person would represent like 10% of the House because... And so it would make sense to give them more.
Oh, I don't know whether we want to give one person 10% of the votes. I think that's asking for
somebody
trouble.
who's argued that we should not have a second chamber in a modern democracy, which has not a single person elected by the public in it. I don't think variations of appointment system are very attractive.
Now, we are going to be taking your calls right through until 4 a.m. 0345 6060 973. I want to hear how a few of you voted today. Why did you vote for the party that you did? Did you vote on national issues, on local issues? Did the Brexit general election make it a Brexit local election? So far, I'd say it certainly did not. 0345 6060 973. You can also watch us on Facebook Live as well. We'll come to more of your calls and we'll hear more from our panel in just a moment. This is LBC. It's 11:45. It's 12 minutes to 12 here on LBC. Andrew Gwynn has said goodbye, so I'll say goodbye even though he's gone. He's been a good sport, actually, because he's been on a little bit of a sticky wicket, I suppose it's fair to say. Michael Gove is here for the Conservatives, Nigel Farage for UKIP and Simon Hughes for the Liberal Democrats. Sheila.
Yeah, there's a text here, Nigel Farage, saying, is anybody going to have a go at Nigel Farage on LBC for backing Le Pen? And I should read the full thing. And UKIP isn't a racist party, right?
Well, I've sat for 18 years in the European Parliament and I've watched the French National Front and I've at no point wanted UKIP to do a deal or be in alliance with them in any way at all, because I've always taken the view that the party's roots were deep in Vichy, that anti-Semitism was part of their DNA. I've never wanted to go there. I have to say, since Marine Le Pen became leader back in 2011, she's made some very big, significant changes, including getting rid of her own father from the party. I know her reasonably well. I don't believe she's said anything in this campaign that is offensive or outrageous in any way at all. But the key to it was I have supported and backed a French Conservative called Nicolas Dupont-Aignan for years. He's an Assemblée Nationale member. He got 5% in the first round. He has now teamed up with Le Pen. She's resigned as president of the French National Front. And on Sunday, the French effectively are having a referendum because you've got Macron, who wants more powers to go to Brussels.
But didn't she resign at the point that she did because she needed to detoxify yet further?
She has been distancing herself from the old National Front ever since 2011. That process continues, but ultimately,
but to do the last bit of it 2 weeks before the general election.
Well, it's been a gradual process, but as I say, she's teamed up with a deeply respectable Conservative. I have no reservations about her. But I would admit, I still have some about the party.
Alex Salmond, I do apologise, I forgot to introduce you.
Well, I was just going to say that should balance things out, shouldn't it? And for France, on one side we've got Barack Obama, on the other side we've got Nigel Farage. Should be ixie-pixie then.
Well, you know, Alex, funny, isn't it? But Brexit happened last year and Trump happened last year. And I'm not saying Le Pen's going to win, but I tell you something. Over 40% of the French people on Sunday are going to vote for a candidate that wants to leave the European Union, and that actually is very, very significant.
Can I tell you something? That outside nominations or endorsements, doesn't matter who it is, whether it's you or Barack Obama, never work anyway. There's no point in you liking or not liking Marine Le Pen. It's not going to have no effect whatsoever on the French presidential result.
Michael, you've got a minor result, but an interesting one nonetheless.
Apparently the Conservatives have gained Bedworth North from Labour. I think that's in...
Warwickshire.
Exactly.
Near
Nuneaton.
And the Liberal Democrats have gained a seat from Labour in Monmouthshire, Caldecott Castle, which sounds a delightful place.
Very nice.
Yes.
But, I mean, look, I must point out, we can't read anything into these early results because they are just ward results. They're not council results. They're areas where maybe only a couple of thousand people have voted, although county council seats tend to be more like 5,000 to 10,000.
But with respect, you can read stuff. All of us know, having gone to local election counts, that actually it's ward by ward that you build up the composition. So if a ward changes hands, whether to the Tories in Warwickshire or to Liberal Democrats
in interesting turnout figures in Monmouth, 43%, and another one I saw in Wales, Merthyr, I think it was 37%, which in a local election it would be, 25 to 30% normally.
If you get over a third, I think my colleagues would confirm, if you get over a third in a local election, other than in very exceptional circumstances,
that's a decent showing.
well.
Michael Gove, are you expecting blue areas to go even bluer? Or are you expecting red areas to go blue?
I think that there are some... It seems as though there are one or two red areas that will go blue. I think that if you look back 4 years, some of the blue areas, I think you reached, it's a cliche, a high watermark. But I do think that there are some areas where Theresa May's particular appeal will mean that some ex-UKIP voters will come over to the Conservatives and some will switch direct from Labour to Conservative. How many? I don't know. At this stage, when the results tomorrow morning could make a complete fool out of any prediction that I might make, I'm inclined to be cautious, but I do think that we will see some incremental advance.
One of the interesting things, in just quickly, is with Nigel here, is that if the UKIP vote falls, it would be expected probably to go to the Tories, and therefore in places that normally we and the Tories would be fighting, and where we might hope to make gains, actually that might be more difficult because the Tories will be bolstered by extra UKIP votes going over to them. So it isn't a simple bilateral set of decisions.
Exactly.
Conservative council candidates in Wales are Theresa May's candidates, the party has claimed, which I suppose factually is true. But this is all adding to the presidential portrayal of Theresa May, isn't it, when even local council candidates are being asked to call themselves that?
I've had a look at some of the election literature since the point was made earlier, and everywhere I can see that Conservative brand and logo on all our literature. But naturally, when you've got a tremendous asset like Theresa May as your leader, then you're going to want to ensure that people recognise that...
You weren't saying that in July. I thought it was you that wanted to be leader.
Yes, but I have said since then repeatedly that I made some mistakes in my political career, and one of them was not recognising that Theresa May was the right person to be the leader.
What she got that you didn't have?
Well, have you got all night?
Great shoes, great shoes. Although you have
I think this show's on until 4 o'clock in the morning.
She's got the job.
Look, Alex, us exes need to stick together.
At least I got there.
At least I won a referendum. But anyway,
and I won 2 elections. You should try it.
Maybe one day I'll tell you how to win a referendum.
Oh my goodness me! Look, everyone, the snow's gone yellow.
Actually, we have got a lot of exes on the panel tonight. Nigel Farage, ex-UKIP leader. Simon Hughes, ex-deputy leader, aspirant leader of the Liberal Democrats on several occasions. I think I'm right.
I think
twice is several.
I think the one thing that Alex and I would recognise is that our parties are now better led by women.
Oh yes, make way for the women, undoubtedly. When Simon and Andrew were talking about political rivalries, and I always reckon it's where you're competing in the turf. Like SNP and Labour are daggers drawn in Aberdeen, but in Aberdeenshire, the SNP and Labour get on really well because we're not really competing. Well, tonight I was campaigning in Dice, and this group of red-shirted and anorak people came up and asked for a selfie, and I thought they were a Labour canvassing team. And I thought, this is really comradely. And it was only when we were getting the pictures taken I realised they were from the blood transfusion service.
John Vale from the Press Association, he's just tweeted, Tory source text to say that initial results in Wales suggest Labour is in real trouble. What else do you think a Tory source is going to say? I think is the answer to that one. Kieran's in Wolverhampton. Kieran, go ahead.
Hi there. Like I say, I live in Wolverhampton and we've got the West Midlands Metro Mayor elections. I mean, to be honest, one thing that annoyed me most is that a lot of the candidates actually said that I don't believe in a mayor, but actually expected you to vote for them. That's what I mean. Myself, I voted for the Lib Dems purely because of their plan for the growth of the local economy to try and make the West Midlands quite a big part. But it just annoyed me that quite a few of the candidates said that it was one their first part. I don't believe in a Metro Mayor, and it makes me a bit ironic that they don't believe in it, but actually running and actually...
it's not unique. It's not unique. I've been elected 4 times to the European Parliament, and I haven't really wanted to be an MEP. And we have Scottish nationalists who go to Westminster and want to break up the United Kingdom, and Sinn Féin stand for elections too. So it's not that unusual to stand for a post that you're sceptical about.
Newsnight are reporting that they think Labour are going to lose 300 to 400 seats tonight. Now we are going to have a Labour representative on the panel after midnight. We haven't got one at the moment. That would be catastrophic for them, wouldn't it, Michael Gove?
It wouldn't be a great night.
Always master of the understatement. Simon Hughes?
It certainly wouldn't be a great night. I was just looking at the best predictors of these things before, which was Rawlington Thrasher, professors from Plymouth, talking about England. Their prediction was in England, Labour minus 75. If we're talking across the 3 countries of hundreds, that's seriously poor show.
And it would reverse all of the gains that Ed Miliband made in 2013, wouldn't it? Which in the second, or we're now in the 3rd year of this government, aren't we? The election was in 2015, only just the 3rd year. You would expect Labour to be making lots of gains, Sheila, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and my reflection on this is that when you were talking to me earlier, Nigel, about Marine Le Pen, and the big criticism that Macron puts to her and others say is his strength is a sense of optimism. Now, Labour clearly is not engendering a sense of optimism for enough people, I would argue, for many people at all in the electorate at the moment. But Michael Gove, in a sense, neither is Theresa May. What she is lucky.
I wouldn't say that it was luck. I would say it was good judgment in Theresa's case. And one of the things about, we've had, everyone knows, ever since 2008, ever since the financial crash, the developed world has been going through a difficult economic period. But over the course of the last 10 or 11 months, we've seen, a stable economy, and we've also seen growth and votes of confidence in British industry, major international investors deciding that Britain outside the European Union is a place that they can have confidence in. So I think that's all down to the fact that with Theresa at the helm...
As a Remainer in the referendum.
Absolutely, but that's to her credit. The thing is that I think it's admirable that someone who is a reluctant Remainer has embraced the democratic vote.
Just very quickly, some interesting breaking news. UKIP Deputy Leader Peter Whittle is going to stand in the South Basildon and East Thurrock seat. Nigel Farage, quick comment.
Well, good luck to him. Good luck to him. All I can say is it's not just Labour that's going to lose seats tonight, and I'm very pleased I'm coming off air in a moment.
When exactly?
Well, no, it's going to be a rough night for UKIP, if that was no doubt.
Nigel Farage, thank you. UKIP MEP Michael Gove is still with us as well from the Conservatives, Alex Salmond from the SNP and Simon Hughes from the Lib Dems. Both of you are going. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Nigel Farage.
Thank you.
And Michael Gove as well. Thank you very much indeed. Stay with us, 0345 606 0973 to give your own view. Ian Dale, Sheila Fogarty with you until 4 o'clock this morning here on LBC. From about 2, I think, a pattern will start to emerge of what these results are telling us about how people have voted today, and perhaps what these results are telling us about how people might vote in the general election on June the 8th. A few results in so far, but the action starts in about an hour and a half, 2 hours' time, I would say. Keep your calls coming as well. 0345 606 0973.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. LBC's Election Night Live with Ian Dale and Sheila Fogarty.
3 minutes past midnight here on LBC. You're listening to LBC's local election results programme with Sheila Fogarty and me, Ian Dale. We have a new panel for you. Nearly new. Simon Hughes. Simon Hughes is still here. He's never been described as nearly new.
I was going to say thank you.
And Matt Zarb-Cousin joins us.
Pre-loved, I think you'd say now, wouldn't you?
Pre-loved.
Pre-loved. Yeah.
Matt Zarb-Cousin joins us. He used to be Jeremy Corbyn's... What was your official title, Matt?
Spokesperson.
Media advisor. And Alex Salmond is still here. He's nearly new as well. But a brand new panellist, Gavin Barwell, joins us. He is from the Conservatives and he's local government minister, housing minister in the Department of Local Government and Communities. Now, before we go on, let me tell you, we still want to take your calls over the course of the next 4 hours. 0345 606 0973. What do you make of what's happening so far? I have to tell you, not a lot has happened so far. There seem to be a few Labour losses in Wales, but that's about all we've got for you in terms of individual ward results. Let's cross live to Westminster and get a roundup from our senior reporter, Vincent McAviney. Vincent, what are you hearing?
Well, things I'm looking out for tonight, Ian, these results in Wales, now we've only got 2 of them. It's Wrexham and Caldecott Castle. They are both Labour losses. And Labour's demise in Wales could be historic. A recent general election poll had the Conservatives at 40% and Labour down at 30%. Now, if that came true, it would be a historic moment for the Tories, who in 2015 got just 27.2% of the vote. And Labour losing an election there in the general election would be the first time since World War I. So we're going to watch carefully those results coming in through the night. And down in the southwest, we've heard a lot about the Lib Dem fight back even before this general election. And historically, the Lib Dems do well in local elections, and the southwest used to be a real power base for them. All that changed at the last election. So we'll see whether they've managed to turn it around, revive their fortunes. Tim Farron has been down there quite a bit, and we'll see if they are going to sort of take those seats or whether the Conservatives are managing to hold on. And looking also at Essex, the results that are going to come in there, UKIP made significant gains in 2013, but it looks like a lot of those seats might be going to go back to the Tories. Now, the UKIP election strategy has been slightly erratic. I was at the launch of their integration agenda a few weeks ago. It was widely criticised as Islamophobic, and Paul Nuttall, who has run himself, he lost the Stoke by-election, he's running in Boston. He is sort of very much the kind of biggest name running for UKIP. The other names that they have, Nigel Farage, Suzanne Evans, they're not running this time round, so it'll be a bit of a test for UKIP tonight. And also the Labour in Scotland, going back to that party. Now, when I interviewed Jeremy Corbyn at the beginning of this local election campaign, he wouldn't set a figure on what would make a successful night. And I think there'll be a lot to worry about in Labour. Glasgow and Edinburgh, traditionally powerhouse seats for them. But we know that there's been a bit of a mixed message between Scottish Labour and the National Labour Party. Kezia Dugdale and Jeremy Corbyn have somewhat butted heads because Jeremy Corbyn has given a bit of a mixed message on independence and also calling for Article 50 to be triggered the morning after the Brexit referendum. She has publicly criticised him for that before, with Scotland having voted to remain. So those are the areas that we'll be keeping a close eye on through the night as the results start to come in.
Thank you, Vinny. Vincent McAviney, LBC's senior reporter. Simon Hughes for the Liberal Democrats, who's here. What is interesting about this local election, we were just reflecting on during the news, is that yes, we've had some simultaneous local and general election voting in the past, but this these local elections are, in a sense, I can't remember, are a real warm-up act for the general election. The big question is, will they just echo what we're about to see on June the 8th? Will it just be the shape of things to come?
Sheila, I think you're right. Certainly we've had fairly frequently, coincidentally, local and UK elections. I actually don't think that's a good thing, because then people vote locally on national issues and you don't vote as you should do for your local government on local issues. I, like you, can't remember, I was trying to recollect, when we've had local elections, major local elections, every council in Scotland, every council in Wales, and many councils in England, after a general election has begun. The general election formally began at midnight last night, first day local elections. I think the difference will be that, let's say, a third of the people vote roughly in local elections. Nonetheless, the significance will be that if Labour and UKIP see their votes fall significantly, and if the Tory and Liberal Democrats' votes go up, which is what the predictions are by the people who know most about these things, and what certainly we hope ours will, then I think that will accelerate that movement in the general election, because people will, read it in the papers, they'll hear it on the radio, they'll hear it.
It will just give them the nudge.
It'll be the backdrop. It'll be the backdrop, and people will see the Labour Party and UKIP collapsing, and therefore they'll say, I'm not going to back a loser.
There's actually been a Labour gain in Monmouthshire, so one Labour loss and one Labour gain. That's our cousins.
Perfect on that note. I think what we're going to see is, I think we're going to see Labour and the Tories much closer in the share of the vote than what the polls suggest. And I think what we could see is, and obviously what we expect is the UKIP vote to be hoovered up by the Tories, and that's obviously going to happen in Wales and obviously Scotland's exceptional circumstances, something that's happened over a long period of time. In England, I think we are going to see the Labour and the Tory vote very much closer than the polls, and I think that over the course of the campaign, the polls are going to tighten. And I don't think this, to disagree with Simon really, I don't think this is going to reflect the general election result. I think we've got a long way to go in the campaign.
What would be an acceptable result for Labour tonight, an acceptable result for Jeremy Corbyn?
I think in the context, with the fact that 4 years ago, this is the last time we voted on these particular seats was 4 years ago. And I think we peaked in 2012, and that's because we took a lot of the Lib Dem vote because they were in coalition with the Tories. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. UKIP's now collapsed because of Brexit, and the Tories have picked up a lot of the UKIP vote. So I think in the context, probably expected to lose about 100 seats in England.
If some of my programmes are anything to go by, the Tories are picking up quite a lot of Labour votes as well. And one such listener and caller is Paul now in Liverpool. So answer what Paul says, if you would, in a few moments,
sure.
Matt. Paul, good evening to you, or good morning now, actually. It's 10 past midnight. You voted Conservative, and because I know Liverpool, I know that if you've voted Labour all your life, to turn and vote Conservative is quite a turn. Tell me why you have.
Well, I actually did vote Conservative in 1997.
Okay, so not the first time.
Well, going against the trend there, weren't you?
Yeah, I was a former member of the Labour Party, but I gave up on Labour and I began to support UKIP. I voted UKIP in the last general election. But this time, it's the first time for 20 years. I never thought I'd do it again, but I've actually voted Conservative. But I've rang a few friends up, and they voted Conservative as well, which has surprised me, But a lot of people just see the Conservatives now as the only really credible party of government, The other parties they've lost credibility.
And what is it about Theresa May's Conservatives that really won your vote? Is it her absolute approach on Brexit?
Well, she seems a very honest and straightforward politician. And she's been very tenacious on this, pushing this Article 50. There was a lot of opposition to it. I think she's proved her worth as a leader. And I've got confidence that she's going to take the country.
But a lot of people will say that's what they see in Jeremy Corbyn, that he's a straight and honest leader. Why do you think that Theresa May is getting the rub of the green on this and Jeremy Corbyn isn't?
To be honest, I think Jeremy Corbyn is a disgrace. I can't believe that the Labour Party will present the British people with Jeremy Corbyn as the leader. I think that's just disrespecting the British public.
Matt, well, hang on, Paul. Let Matt come back on that.
Well, the Labour Party lost two general elections, lost in 2010, lost in 2015. And the members who decided who the leader is, the Labour Party needed to go in a different direction from New Labour. And the New Labour made a lot of... Sorry, say that again?
They weren't listening to the Labour voters. We don't like Jeremy Corbyn.
He is not a traditional Labour man. He supported the Irish Republicans. He's linked up with all these Palestinian causes. He's not a patriot. He's not like James Callaghan. He's not an old-fashioned Labour guy.
Paul, Matt worked very closely with Jeremy Corbyn for 10 months. He saw him every day. He knows him a lot better than any of us around this table. So let Matt just explain to you why you're wrong.
Well, I think that what Jeremy Corbyn would do if he was Prime Minister is he would hand power back to the people from the 1%. We've got a runaway 1% elite in this country, corporations that are have their hold over the government, and there's a rigged system. And what we want to do is hand power back to the people. We want to fund the NHS properly. We want to stop, tax cuts to the wealthy, tax cuts to big business, and we want to ensure that public services are properly funded. And Jeremy Corbyn is on the side of the people, as far as I'm concerned. The guy is completely honest. And I take your point, about what has been reported about his past, but you have to remember Margaret Thatcher met the IRA. Tony Blair met the IRA. Yes, absolutely. It absolutely did.
Personally?
Yes, absolutely. That has been reported. Yep.
Okay, I'll take your word for that one.
And that was part of the peace process. And eventually that was delivered. And He absolutely loves this country. He loves people. You can see it out on the campaign trail. He's out meeting people. He wants the best for Britain. And, I don't take the point that he's not a patriot.
Monmouthshire is all over the place today. The Conservatives have now taken a seat from the Liberal Democrats, so there seems to be a lot of churn in Monmouthshire for some reason. Interesting result, Mark Pack, the Lib Dem blogger, is reporting. There was a by-election in Camden. The Lib Dems have gone from 5th to 2nd place, 7% to 20% in Gospel Oak. Now, on its own, what does that mean? Not a lot, but it's a straw in the wind as to what might happen in London in a general election, where the Lib Dems expect to do possibly much better in a metropolitan centre like London than they may do in the southwest.
I wouldn't just make it as a London point, although you reported Gospel Oak by-election in Camden. When we got hammered, bluntly, we were overtaken not just by the principal party in that seat. In that seat, it would have been Labour in Camden. Other places it would have been the Tories, but we were often overtaken by the Greens and sometimes overtaken by UKIP, and so we went down to 5th in many places, certainly 4th. I know from the campaigning I've done in the last year in London and elsewhere that we are much more likely in all the places we stand now to come in the top 3 at least. And if you look back over the by-elections over the last year, we have by far exceeded all the other parties in terms of net gains in by-elections. Now, by-elections aren't general elections for councils. I understand that completely. But I think we're in a different political place. People understand the politics of all 3 countries are different. Let's taking just for a second. The politics of England are that UKIP are in a busted flush in the sense that they campaigned for us to leave the EU and that decision was taken. So they're much less strong. The Tories are clearly strong and the Prime Minister is clearly presenting herself as a strong leader. Labour have had the difficulties that are being discussed, and Matt and other people can comment on them, but they don't look as if they're a credible alternative. And we're going in the right direction.
Alex Salmon, you have to leave us in a moment, so final word to you. What does success look like for the SNP tonight?
Well, success, as I say, our 2 big prizes would be Glasgow and Aberdeen, but there's many other councils where we're hoping to be in the lead. We want to win the election. And that's how success should be measured in politics. The forecast you had a few minutes ago about hundreds of Labour losses, I wasn't clear if that was in England or England, Scotland and Wales.
I think nationally throughout the whole country.
Well, it would be difficult actually for Labour to lose more than, let's say, 100 seats in Scotland because of the STV system, because it does give you a floor on the number of seats you have. I mean, they had 394 at the last election. So if that is something genuine as opposed to some sort of pre-count rumour, then that would be deep trouble. The one last thing I would say, although I agree with what Simon says about you get some sort of halo effect from success, and certainly we're hoping for that tomorrow in terms of going into this general election, it's also the case that these are different things. I mean, you get different percentage of votes. Rural areas vote in different percentages from urban areas in local elections, middle class areas from working class areas. And always, if the Tories do extremely well in England, let's say, and Scotland perhaps as well, who knows, in these elections, you might get the counter effect as well. A lot of people might say, well, it's time to put the hems on the size of the Prime Minister's majority. Because certainly I'm finding on the doorstep a lot of people don't like the idea of untrammelled Toryism stomping over all opposition.
Well, perhaps some people don't like the thought of untrammelled SNPism trampling over the opposition in Scotland.
Yeah, sure, but if this was a Scottish election, that might be some sort of argument you could bring into play. And even you've realised we're talking about a general election where they're looking at what is
even
going
I've
to be...
realised that. Thank you for your patronising comment.
Well, I wanted to leave you as we discuss this on a weekly basis here. But
Indeed.
listen, I'm away to bed now because not a single Scottish result will be declared until tomorrow. And I'll be up
your jammies
fresh
on.
and early. I've got my jammies on.
Oh my
already.
God! No! We don't want to visit. We don't want to envisage that.
The revelation of the night.
Hang on, we've had Emily Thornbury in her nightie, and now
As
Alex
John
Salmond in his
Jr.
gym
would
jams.
say, pass the sick bag, Alice. Alex,
Alice is the other one.
Alex Salmond, you enjoy your campaign. Thank you very much indeed. Tom says, why didn't I get a vote in Hendon? Is it because I vote UKIP? No, it's because there wasn't an election in Hendon, Tom. I'm glad I can clear that one up for you. Much more of this to come. 0345 6060973 if you'd like to take part in our conversation. Some results are coming in now. We'll bring you more of those in just a moment. 18 minutes past 12.
Stay with us throughout the night. We'll get to your calls as well, so do ring in. 0345 6060973 is the number you can text. And you have been texting and tweeting. Text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Gavin Barwell is with us from the Conservatives, although you'd be forgiven for forgetting that because we've been disgraceful and haven't heard from him yet. We will in just 1 second. Let me just remind you who else is with us. Matt Zarb-Cousin, former Labour media advisor for Jeremy Corbyn. We've just said goodbye to Alex Salmond from the SNP, and Simon Hughes for the Lib Dems is still with us in the studio as well. Gavin Barwell, what's your highest hope for results tonight?
Well, I think the governing party making gains in midterm elections is normally a very unlikely thing. But if we can make progress, that would be very encouraging. You know, obviously, the initial feedback is very good. We're gaining seats from Labour and from the Liberal Democrats. I've just seen picking up Harlow North in Harlow in Essex and Blandford from the Lib Dems in North Dorset. Just picking up on Matt's point about the sort of comparison with when these seats were last fought. Of course, in addition to the normal elections tonight, we've got lots of local government by-elections. And I just picked up a result from Bedfordshire. So the comparison there is not with 4 years ago, but with 2015, the general election. And the Labour vote's down from 23% to 14%. So you can see it's not just the sort of historical comparison with 4 years ago. You can see the effect that we're seeing in terms of the collapse in the Labour vote. So these are very encouraging results for us right across the country.
Bear in mind, we've actually only had about 42 wards have reported so far. Political Betting, helpfully, have a spreadsheet now. Conservatives are up 3, Labour down 4, Liberal Democrats equal 0, Independent up 1, and UKIP -1. So, I mean, again, straws in the wind. Bear in mind there are 4,800 seats up for grabs tonight. This is very, very early days, but certainly in Wales, Gavin, it does seem to be, so far, a good night for the Conservatives. Everyone seems to be predicting Labour's demise in Wales. Sources are saying that the Cardiff City Council leader, Phil Babe, I think it is, he's going to lose his seat to the Conservatives. Now, we're trying to, over the course of the next few hours, look at what this might mean for a general election result. And you will have seen the poll in Wales that showed the Conservatives had, I think, for the first time since 1850, although the Labour Party wasn't actually around then, so I don't know how that statistic is even relevant. What are you expecting in Wales?
Well, I think in Alan Cairns and his team, we've got an excellent team in Wales. We've got some fantastic candidates. I think we've seen real progress there over a number of elections. Actually, we did better in Wales in 2015 than we did, back in 1992, which is the sort of previous recent high watermark. So we're hoping to make further progress, but I don't think we should allow these local election results to act as a sort of prediction for a general election. We shouldn't take anything for granted. They are different contests, fought on a different mix of issues. So the signs are certainly very encouraging, and I think you've seen a Conservative revival in Wales over a number of years, but we shouldn't read too much into these things. We can't take any votes for granted in the general election.
Although with this overlap that Simon Hughes for the Lib Dems was talking about a few moments ago, this overlap of elections here, or these elections tonight being essentially a precursor to the general election in some senses, it isn't clear yet whether people are voting on a national basis today or not, is it? I mean, perhaps it will never be clear.
Well, I think my own experience, and I was a councillor before I was an MP, and years ago I used to be the head of local government at CCHQ on these nights, watching these results in detail, is that, of course, the general state of national politics has an impact on how the parties do in local elections, but you do see variation from council to council depending on what the local issues are. And I think the really important thing is that we don't allow the general election campaign to be dominated by opinion polls or these local election results. It should be fought on the issues. And if you're someone that wants Theresa May to be Prime Minister after the general election, you need
Says
to
the
go out
man
and vote
from the
for her.
party who's 20 points ahead. Why wouldn't you want people to take notice of the opinion polls?
Well, because opinion polls sometimes are wrong. I think if you look back at the EU referendum or you look at the American presidential, they don't always get it right.
They're not 20 points wrong, though, are they?
They're rarely that far wrong, but there is a significant margin of error. We've seen that in recent years, and my message, my seat, as you know, Ian, I've got a majority of 165 at the last generation. I wouldn't want anyone who wants me to stay as the local MP or wants Theresa May as Prime Minister to be complacent.
Can I just make, Sheila, a couple of points following your conversation with Gavin? Firstly, just quickly on Wales. Wales, Labour Party just did the calculations, start this election with 52% of the seats in Wales. So in terms of local government, they're the majority party. They have a majority, not just the largest single party, but they are the largest.
Genuine power base.
They have most of the seats. And of course, it's the only part of the UK where they are the government of the devolved administration. But secondly, one of the things that looks as if it's happening, and we expected it, is that if the UKIP vote is collapsing, it looks as if it's going to the Tories. So actually what we're seeing is a Tory UKIP vote coming together. The Tories are becoming more UKIP. I mean, the reality is they're playing to that, and that reflects the Prime Minister's conversation and all that she said in the last couple of weeks.
I think you were reading my mind, because that was the theme of the question I was about to put to you, Gavin Barwell. Matt Zarb-Cousin, who's sitting next to you, former Labour media advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, said it. Simon Hughes has said it. You're hoovering up UKIP votes. Your previous leader, the Prime Minister of the time, David Cameron, said these were a bunch of loonies, and now you're chasing their votes.
Well, I think we're winning votes from all parties. If you look at these results that have come in, we're gaining seats from the Liberal Democrats, as I said, in Dorset and in Monmouthshire so far this evening. Certainly, we're picking up votes directly from the Labour Party as well.
But that speech outside Downing Street was pure UKIP, wasn't it?
No, I don't think it was at all. I think voters
faceless bureaucrats
voters of all
trying to
parties
interfere with our election, our democracy.
Statement of fact, I
thought
Nigel Farage had written the speech.
Prime Minister who's going to go into these negotiations and get the best deal for the country. It's not something that's just combined to reserved to UKIP voters.
Why on earth wouldn't a political party want to pick up votes from another political party? That's what they're in the business for.
Yes, it is, but still how they frame that message tells you something about them, does it not?
But if you want to pick up Labour votes, you frame the message to pick up those votes. If you want to get UKIP votes, you frame the message for those votes. There's nothing disreputable about that.
Yes, but you don't morph into something you're not, or do you?
Do you think that Theresa May's morphed into UKIP?
She's publicly morphing into something I haven't seen before.
Would Ruth Davidson and the Scottish Conservatives be doing so well if this strategy was just about hoovering up UKIP votes? No, they wouldn't. I mean, the evidence is very clear that right across the country, we are the only party, actually, that is competitive right across the country. And that is because voters see that in Theresa May, we've got the right person to provide strong and stable leadership.
There we go.
Bingo!
I had to say it.
25 minutes.
I didn't say it the first time I spoke.
Just quickly, you certainly are present in all three parts of Great Britain, as are Labour and us. I think you'll see at the end of the night that we will have made progress also in all three parts of Britain. And our case, to deal with Sheila and Ian's point 2 minutes ago, is that we are seeking to present ourselves as the only effective opposition to the direction of the Tory party.
On Brexit, particularly.
On Brexit and Europe. And it's hard line because we don't think Labour are being an effective
opposition. Yourself as the UKIP of Remain.
Let's go and see what's happening in the Northwest. Tom Dunn is our LBC reporter in Chester. Tom, any straws in the wind from the Northwest so far?
Well, in the Lancashire County Council elections, it's an area that's toed and froed in power in recent years. The party that needs an overall majority has to get 43 wards. Labour won last time in 2013 with 39, so essentially what we're looking at is that they need another 4 seats to gain a majority, and in Lancashire with 84 seats and 315 candidates, it's a hard ask, especially when you consider the Tory party have won the 2 before that with a majority, and they're looking at needing only what we're expecting, about 7 or 8 to gain a majority. So it's somewhere where analysts have said as well that it could prove to be a strong indicator for the general election.
I mean, Lancashire, I think Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Northumberland, those are councils that I think most people are going to look at as swing councils. The Tories and Labour launched their local election campaigns in Nottinghamshire. A lot of effort has gone into Lancashire. Have we had any individual results yet in Lancashire?
Not as far as I'm aware, no. I think they'll be coming through tomorrow morning, but... The turnout
We're already
in
there.
2000.
Yeah, it is tomorrow morning.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm looking at the turnout as well. I mean, it's not expected to rise anything above 31%, because a lot of people around there have said it's not really sparked the interest of people. Mainly, it might be because of a general election overload, possibly people being election this, election that all the time in recent months. So I don't know. I mean, we could see a result, maybe an initial result coming through sometime in the morning, but I don't think we'll know until around 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
OK, Tom,
little point,
Tom, thank you very much indeed. That's Tom Dunn in Chester reporting for us.
Just quickly, the interesting thing is that the country divides, take England for a second, the country divides into different sorts of contests. So I accept that Lancashire, probably, and Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire are Labour-Tory contests, principally. Somerset and Cornwall will be Tory Liberal Democrat contests. But there are some interesting new players in the game, which are the metro mayors, which we've never had before. And whereas I think all of us are expecting that in Greater Manchester and Greater Merseyside there will be a Labour victor, because that would be extraordinary if it wasn't. We know that the West Midlands may be much more balanced. We know that the West of England is a place where Liberal Democrats may do best or better.
Although Michael Gove was saying his soundings are that a surprise is coming in Tees Valley.
Yeah. So there are some which are more marginal, but they're interesting because we've never had those before. And some people might think, yes, this is a really good idea to have somebody looking after the whole of a sub-region or a
might
region.
talk a little bit more about that in a second. I also want to ask you, was Brexit a consideration when you voted in these local elections? Because in theory it ought not to be, because you ought to be voting on local issues, I suppose. But Brexit is the issue which hangs over politics more generally. It's certainly why the Prime Minister called a general election. 0345 6060 973. Rob Halfon, the Tory MP for Harlow, he's reporting 2 Conservative gains in Harlow, which used to be a Labour seat, only went, I think it went Conservative in 2010, but has got quite a sizable majority there now. So, more from our panel, Gavin Barwell, Matt Saab-Cousins, Simon Hughes in just a moment, and we'll hear from our elections analyst, Gareth Knight. He will no doubt have some more results for us. This is LBC News. You are listening to LBC's local election night coverage with Sheila Fogarty and myself, Ian Dale. A little bit of news from the Nuneaton Fox on Twitter. We have to trust the Nuneaton Fox, who says the Labour leader of Warwickshire County Council is gone. He's lost his seat. Gareth Knight has rejoined us, our elections analyst. And what do you make of the few results that we've had so far?
OK, so taking individual wards, we don't want to read too much into them. When you put them all together, there's a picture starting to emerge, and that picture is actually quite overwhelmingly good for the Conservatives. It's looking at the moment as if they're not only going to take back virtually all of the seats that they lost 4 years ago, but they're going to build on that as well. I haven't actually seen a specific ward yet that they didn't, that they've gained, that they lost, that they didn't hold prior to 2013, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just about.
But it certainly looks as if they're definitely on track to basically get all the losses back. And of course, that then you then have to go back to 2009 when the Conservatives were still building in local government. So it's actually looking very positive. It's still early days, though. There's a couple of interesting areas that are going to come in where we're going to be able to analyse the UKIP vote. Lincolnshire in particular, a very strong UKIP area. If we really want to see the impact of the UKIP vote and how that's translating into the Conservative vote, which is the general expectation, we'll get to see that in Lincolnshire over the next sort of hour or so, because there are results coming in.
And is there a possibility that Warwickshire will end up in Conservative control, or is it too early to say that at this stage?
It's too early to say as far as I'm aware, but their results seem to be coming in thick and fast. Certainly one of the results that came in, Michael, I think, briefly mentioned it, and Gavin and I were outside when it came in as well. it is genuinely an unbelievable turnaround. I mean, it went from something like around about 900 votes to Labour to 450 votes to the Conservatives, and in one cycle it's gone to something like 750 votes to Labour and 1,500 votes to the Conservatives. And there's no general election on the same day. It's a huge turnaround.
Matt Zarb-Cousin, you were a spokesperson for Jeremy Corbyn until not that long ago. If these results turn out to be losses in the 300s, maybe even 400s for Jeremy Corbyn, it's too early to say yet, but if they are, what must his response be between now and June the 8th?
Well, I don't think anything will change. We've got a general election campaign to fight in the next few weeks, and there's lots of things planned, and we're obviously Labour very fully aware of the scale of the task ahead, and I don't think these local elections are a reflection of what will happen on June the 8th. I think the turnout's going to be very low. The general election campaign has sort of taken over really in the public's mind, and people aren't engaged with politics at the best of times. I mean, so they're not. Lots of people don't even know there's local elections today. I mean, I think as the weeks progress, people become more engaged with politics, and I think that hopefully we have the debates as well.
Jeremy Corbyn's one big success is that he has engaged people to join the Labour Party. But why hasn't that success translated so far into the electorate? Why hasn't he been able to connect with people who maybe aren't sort of on the left of British politics? Because he's got to win those people over to win a general election.
Absolutely. And I think the main reason is people in their day-to-day lives aren't, they don't follow politics like we do. They don't follow it closely every twist and turn. They live it.
They live it, and the
absolutely.
But the problem with Labour is that for the last few elections, your party has been on the doorsteps and failing to convince them that you can change how they're living their politics.
You can't even convince Labour MPs.
Let me finish. What I'm trying to say is, when people engage with politics, when they have a vote a decision to make, when there's a decision that's imminent. And they engage with politics, then that's when I think people will start to realise that Jeremy is not the person that has been portrayed by the media. And I think people just pick up little bits from the media, from the press and from the negative coverage from the establishment press, and it's always overwhelmingly negative.
But this is all a bit excuse making again, isn't it?
It's not.
Well, hang on. In the same way that as Theresa May sat in the chair opposite people like Robert Peston and Andrew Marr, so did Jeremy Corbyn on a number of occasions. Equal opportunity to make equal impact.
Let's have an equal opportunity. Let's have a debate. Let's have a live TV debate, and we'll see who the public will decide is the person that they want to be Prime Minister. Give the public that choice, because people don't follow politics like we do, and to the general public this election is not a foregone conclusion. People do not engage with politics the same way we do, and you have to give the public that choice.
I don't think you can blame it on the media. I mean, the issue surely that Jeremy Corbyn's got is he can't even convince Labour MPs. It's not the media. In this campaign, I've lost count of the number of Labour MPs I've seen interviewed asked the simple question: is Jeremy Corbyn the right person to be Prime Minister? And they won't answer that question. Yes, that's his fundamental problem.
Jeremy Corbyn wants to change the Labour Party. As I said, we lost 2 general elections, and the party needs to go in a different direction if it's going to appeal to the British public again. The British public rejected New Labour. We need to go in a different direction, and that's what Jeremy's doing.
Right, let's go to a call. Matthew's in Hinckley. Hi, Matthew.
Hi.
What would you like to say?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I think we need to see more attempts at progressive alliances ahead of the general election. And I know this has been raised in the context of the general election. And my reasoning for that is because I think all too often Tories win not because they have a majority in a constituency of support, but because the vote against them is split, and that's primarily amongst centre-left parties.
But you could say that about Labour and the Liberal Democrats. In seats that they win, it's because the opposition is split.
Well, that's true, but I'm saying this as a progressive, and I'm saying this as someone who'd like to see...
What does that even mean?
Sorry?
What does that even mean? To voters out there, you say, I'm a progressive. I'll tell you what, they don't talk about progressives down at the Dog and Duck, do they?
All right, then. I believe in a society which is fairer. I believe in...
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Oh, Conservatives believe.
I mean, Gavin Barwell will tell you that he believes in that. Is he a progressive?
We just have different views about what fairness looks like.
Do you want me to explain it a bit further?
Go on.
I believe in those with the broadest shoulders paying a little bit more in tax. I believe in a bit more being spent on our public services to ensure that they are properly resourced and properly funded. And I think, broadly speaking, centre-left party, including the Lib Dems, of which I'm a member, that is what we believe, and that's what I'd like to see happen in government.
Just picking up on that point, Gavin, why have you given tax cuts to the wealthiest in society? Why have you cut corporation tax from 28% to 19% and defunded the NHS?
We've cut corporation tax because we want this to be a country where businesses want to set up and succeed, and that's why we've had the highest level of economic growth of any of the major industrial economies. Why? If you want to talk about tax, the thing I'd say to you is a simple thing. When we came to office in 2010, people on the lowest paid jobs were paying significant amounts of income tax. We've raised the personal allowance, and I hope we're going to get to the point where someone on... I'm very happy to give credit as well to our Liberal Democrat partners in the first 5 years. We've carried on doing it without the Liberal Democrats after 2015, and I'd like to see us get to the point where people earning the minimum wage aren't paying income tax. We've also, if we're talking about helping low-paid people, introduced a living wage that is higher than the minimum wage that Ed Miliband was promising at the last general election. So, your caller was talking about progressives and fairness. There's some examples of progressive conservative policies.
Matthew, do you agree with anything that Gavin said there, or do you regard him, despite what he said, as completely... What's the opposite of progressive? A conservative?
Well, indeed, and regressive, and that's why I've always considered myself anti-conservative throughout my whole political life. And the trouble is that the Tories and Theresa May talk a good game in terms of sounding as if they want to help the just about managings, but when it comes to the actual policies and actions in government, if there's not a party like the Lib Dems there to hold their feet to the fire, it just doesn't happen. In reality, they are regressive, they're not progressive.
Matthew, thank you very much. Let's move on to Laura, who's in Westminster. Hi, Laura.
Yeah, hi, thanks for taking my call. I want to say that a lot of people in the Labour Party are support Jeremy Corbyn, not support Tony Blair, and people who feel an affinity with Tony Blair. So the Labour MPs who were trying to oust Jeremy Corbyn and were smearing him and just making disparaging comments about him for the last year or two, they have done the party a huge disservice. I want to vote for Corbyn, but I'm really put off by the right of centre MPs around him who keep stabbing him in the back.
Well, I'm sure Matt Zarb-Cousin is going to agree with you, but you were at the centre of this. You saw this on a day-to-day basis. How debilitating was it for you as somebody, a senior advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, having to cope with this and having to constantly go out and tell the journalists at Westminster that, well, these people need to shut up effectively?
Yeah, there was a lot of briefing against the leadership from Labour MPs, as well documented. There was a lot of briefing from our own side. And that's obviously very unhelpful, and it's very difficult to operate in a professional way when you've got that going on. But what Jeremy's very committed to is changing the Labour Party. The Labour Party needs to change. We need to go in a different direction, and that's what Jeremy's putting forward. And his policies are very popular.
What will that direction look like? Because all the evidence suggests that voters do not want a far left government. Is that direction of change further to the left? Because it's significantly further to the left of, say, New Labour, isn't it?
Well, I don't think the public look at things in a left-right on the left-right spectrum. I think they just look at policies that they like, and Jeremy's policy he wants to build 1 million houses in the first term. He wants to invest in the NHS. He wants to reverse the tax cuts to the wealthy.
And corporation tax is going to pay for all of it.
Well, no, actually, reverse cuts to capital gains tax, or reverse cuts to the taxes for income tax for the wealthiest. The manifesto will be fully costed. And
well, we look forward to all the manifestos, because I think this is an election where actually the manifestos, I think, are going to be read much more than in previous ones. Before we go to the break, Gareth Knight, our elections analyst, any news from you?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of a pattern emerging in Lincolnshire. So far, they've got new boundaries there, so we can't be precise, but it's looking like around about 40% of the UKIP vote is going straight to the Conservatives and turning UKIP seats into pretty safe Conservative seats. And the Labour vote seems to be fairly stable, but I mean, this is Lincolnshire. The Labour vote is not particularly strong there anyway. So there is a I wouldn't quite say a pattern yet, but there are certainly indications.
A shift.
Yeah, about 40% of the UKIP vote is quite significant.
Abby in Surrey says, Ian.
Ooh.
She directs it to you.
Does she?
Yes, she does.
Oh, dear.
In light of our conversation earlier about Theresa May appealing to UKIP voters and the proof that Gareth's just given us that it seems to be working, are you saying that in order to win votes from UKIP, Mrs May should pretend to be very right-wing, xenophobic and bigoted, a church minister's daughter?
Well, I don't accept the premise of the question, because I don't believe that UKIP voters
Now you sound like a politician.
Well, I don't believe that UKIP voters are generally xenophobic, racist and bigoted. Yes, of course they have they have some of those. So do all the parties, frankly, even, dare I say it, the Liberal Democrats. So I think to characterise a whole political party like that, remember that's what David Cameron did in this very studio back in 2007. You mentioned it earlier. What was it? Fruitcakes, loonies and something else.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Closet racist.
Closet racist. I mean, it wasn't very pleasant, and I think that did him an enormous amount of damage, actually. So I don't accept the premise of the question. So there we go.
There
I
you
do
go,
sound
Abby.
like a politician,
You do,
don't I?
Yeah. Abby, I asked it.
And I got out
He
of that
answered
10
it.
years ago.
I asked
He's
it.
answering
He
for me.
answered,
It's great.
he answered it, and it was a terrible answer. Sorry, Ian. Stay with LBC until, stay with us all day, all night. But Ian and I are here with you till 4, bringing you the results as they come in and the implications of them. The questions that you want to put to our guests here. Our guests are Gavin Barwell for the Conservative Party. Matt Zarb-Cousins is here, in a sense, representing the Labour Party. Cousin, sorry, singular. Yes. It's got an S on it here, but I knew it was a singular because I asked him. And still, I put an S on. Anyway, Gareth Knight too, LBC's elections analyst.
And Simon Hughes.
And Simon Hughes is joining us. Yes, out of sight, out of mind. Apologies. He's joining us after a little tea break. 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Ian very definitely taking questions. The time is now very nearly 11 minutes to 1.
You're listening to LBC's local election night coverage. Some results are coming in now. If we look at the totals so far, the Conservatives are up 10, Labour down 11, Liberal Democrats down 1, Independent up 1, UKIP down 2, Greens up 2, others up 1. So again, this is just in England, by the way. These do not include the Welsh results, and the Welsh results actually seem to be coming through a lot quicker than those in England. I don't actually know why that is. So we'll talk about those a little bit in a moment. 0345 6060 973. Particularly want to hear from you over the next hour or so as to whether you think Brexit actually played a role in these local elections. It's almost difficult to imagine why someone would vote a particular way on Brexit in a local election, but maybe you did. 0345 6060 973.
I'm not voting in any of these elections because of where I live.
No.
But I think Brexit might well have influenced how I voted. It certainly is. Yeah, and it certainly is in the general election. Although, to be fair, I'm not going to reveal who, but I'm going to vote in the general election for the person I would have voted for anyway, had Brexit been a completely different result. But I can see that people would regard it as their, even just for themselves, a kind of vote for them in their own heads about Brexit.
So what you're saying is that the way Theresa May has framed this general election as a Brexit election
is probably going to work for her.
Probably going to work. I mean, maybe not in your case.
Well, maybe not, Ian. Maybe not.
I can't remember whether you declared your colours on the referendum or not.
Well, I did, of course.
You did?
I
Okay,
voted
fine.
to remain.
Okay, well, I won't be so reticent in what I say then. I didn't want to.
But then again, so did Theresa May.
I didn't want to out
discuss. Yeah. You can out me anytime.
Simon Hughes, you're going to leave us in a few minutes, so let's have a few more words with you. What do you think of what you've heard so far in terms of results? It's sort of, do you think that the Liberal Democrats are going to find it difficult tonight? I don't know if you saw the article that Professor Matthew Goodwin wrote from the University of Kent saying that the Lib Dems face a blue wall in the southwest. It's going to be, in the general election, very difficult for them to climb over this blue wall because of the size of the majorities. Are you going to take tonight's results in the southwest as a bit of an indication of what might happen, or do you think they are two separate elections?
Can I start by just quickly stepping back, picking Sheila's point and linking it to yours? I think because the general election gun had been fired on Easter Tuesday by the Prime Minister, unless in your local council there was a big issue, or in your local ward, or your local councillor was somebody you really loved or hated, you are likely to have voted on broader issues in these campaigns, in most places.
I agree with you.
And that's in the unusual circumstance where we have a local election happening after a general election has been called. And I don't think we've ever seen that in the same way before.
Clothed in a Brexit result.
Clothed in a Brexit context. So I think it'll be much more influenced by people's perception of the big position of the parties on the big issues. And in Scotland, obviously, the SNP play a big part in that, and in Wales, Plaid Cymru. Coming in then to how that will apply locally, we are putting forward ourselves as the most effective opposition to the Tories on those big issues. Now, some parts of the country...
difficult with only 9 seats.
Well, no, but this is the general position, and therefore in local elections where we're naturally the alternative to the Tories, the West Country is one, then that's what the position we will put forward. How well we will do depends bluntly on whether the UKIP vote collapses completely and goes completely to the Tories. It's very simple maths. If the Tories had 2,000 votes in a council ward and UKIP had 600 and we were 500 behind and the UKIP votes go across the Tories, we don't catch them by definition.
But that is the danger for you, particularly in the southwest, isn't it? I mean, I was looking at the seats in Cornwall and I was thinking, well, the Lib Dems should, all other things being equal, be able to take 1 or 2 of these back. And in Devon as well. And I came to the conclusion that the electoral arithmetic just won't work like that, assuming that a lot of the UKIP vote does go to the Conservatives.
But linking that point with Sheila's earlier, if after tonight, tomorrow, people will see the local election results on Saturday, and they realise that there is a danger of a large Tory majority across the country and a very dominant Tory majority, people may start saying, hang on a minute, this is not what we want. We absolutely don't want a great dominant single party.
You will remember 1983 and 1987 when you will have put those exact same arguments to the electorate and Margaret Thatcher got 3-figure majorities.
Yeah, I remember well. And we have to therefore see how effective we are at being the opposition. And that's where, like 1983, the challenge, the Alliance Party and the Alliance parties in 83 and the Labour Party came within 2 percentage votes of each other in the national outcome, you remember.
I do.
Labour got 27%, I think, we got 25%. Now, our challenge is to show, look, Labour in many places are not an effective opposition. You can't really think Jeremy Corbyn will be the Prime Minister. And therefore, come on, guys, if you really want somebody to challenge the Tories on the NHS and other things, you've got to support us. And people may move in our
Before we
direction.
come to everyone else, let's take a call from Josh in Wakefield, because he's quite interesting. Josh, what's your voting position at the moment?
Well, the last election, the last local elections, it was UKIP, but I am seriously considering voting for Labour.
There you go, Matt. A ray of sunshine for you.
Good man. A fist pump from Matt's our cousin there, Josh. Why?
The reason I want to vote Labour is because I want change. I voted Leave in the referendum because I want change. And I love Margaret Thatcher, by the by, but I always loved her because whatever she believed in, she followed through. Whether you liked it or disagree with it, she followed through what she believed in.
She would be horrified to hear you saying that you're going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I know, but the point is, the Labour Party are Her Majesty's loyal opposition. That they have to be there. A democracy only functions under an opposition, and there needs to be an opposition. Labour are electable. If people give Jeremy Corbyn time and listen to what he's saying, they will know that he's got good intentions, noble intentions, and he hasn't U-turned that much on what he believes in. With Theresa May, she's U-turned on everything. I didn't want a general election. We're getting a general election. Didn't want this, we do that. Even the...
But if you're a former UKIP voter and you want to leave the EU, she's been very, very clear about how she wants to leave the EU. Brexit means Brexit and all of that, which, I mean, bearing in mind she actually supported Remain, is quite a revelation to us all.
But like I always say, hashtag never trust a Tory.
Apart from Margaret Thatcher, obviously.
Well, she's a league of her own, she is. But with Labour, they want to put money back into mental health services. When the Tories came in, because I've got bipolar and stuff, I used to have appointments going to see a specialist, and that got taken away from me. Now I've got to rely on family, and they're not always there. And I just want some help, and the only people that are offering genuine help for working class people, people with mental health issues, people with genuine health matters, is Labour.
Okay,
everything.
Josh.
There's nothing left for us.
Josh, a lot of food for thought there. Gavin Barwell, you lost a voter there, haven't you? He should be voting for you.
Yeah, the argument I would want to make to him is that this government has put a lot more money into mental health. Actually, as an MP myself, I took a private member's bill through Parliament to tackle some of the discrimination that was in the legislation that we had about stigmatising people with mental health conditions. I suppose the main argument that I would want to make as well is that the only way that you can put more money into mental health services in this country is if you have a strong economy that generates the tax income that we need. And that's the core argument that we're making at this election.
I thought I could sense a strong and stable coming on then, but it didn't
I just gave
quite...
you one of them this time. I don't want to overdo it.
That's the answer that Theresa May gave again and again in the various interviews, in the few interviews that she's done. And in that statement, after she'd seen the Queen yesterday as well, that the tone of that statement was all about Brexit, covering absolutely everything. That doesn't mean she doesn't have to give detail on what she will do with this mythical strong economy. And I say mythical because you mentioned growth a short while ago. It was down in the last quarter.
Yeah, the last quarter figure was lower than
and
expected.
Probably worse to come.
Well, the previous quarter was higher than expected, and these figures do fluctuate. But there's no doubt that since 2000, a couple of years after we came in 2010, we've had an economy that's the last 3 years has performed stronger than our major rivals, and that is crucial if we want to get money into our vital public services.
Lots more to come here on LBC with Sheila Fogarty and myself, Ian Dale. It's coming up to 1 o'clock here on LBC. Gavin Barwell is here from the Conservatives. Matt Zarb-Cousin, former Labour media advisor to Jeremy Corbyn. Gareth Knight, LBC's elections analyst. We're about to say goodbye to Simon Hughes, sadly. It's been very good to see you again, Simon. Thank you very much for joining.
See you both before long.
Well, indeed. Lord Dick Newby, the leader of the Lib Dems in the House of Lords, he's going to be joining us as well for the rest of the evening. So some I think, an exciting 3 hours to come here on LBC, because the results are starting to come in. I won't say thick and fast. In about an hour's time, we should be getting thin and slow. Yeah, we should be getting some final results from some of the county councils. So do stay with us here on LBC.
Yes, we're live and alive. Ian Dale is here with me as well. Ian Dale and Sheila Fogarty here till 4 in the morning. Go.
And if people are watching on Facebook Live, we've had a bit of a swap, haven't we?
We've had a bit of a swap, yes, because the results are going to start more than trickling in, I think, now, aren't they? And I know that you want to keep a close eye on them as they come in.
So Gareth Knight is a little bit slow, so I have to help him on this bit.
We just find it works better this way, don't we, when we do this? With us in the studio, Gavin Barwell from the Conservatives, Matt Zarb-Cousin, singular, former Labour media advisor for Jeremy Corbyn. Little ray of sunshine a moment ago for you when we had a UKIP voter declaring that he's about to vote Labour. But the direction of travel, Gareth, at the moment is UKIP voters going to the Tories.
And in some cases on a massive scale. I mean, Boston's Skegness, so just 3 or 4 days ago, Paul Nuttall, leader of UKIP, declared that was the area he was going to go for, the most Eurosceptic area of the country. And UKIP are basically being destroyed in the Boston area. They're going from having all the council seats to suddenly, I mean, in one case here, UKIP 416, Conservative 1865. They're getting 65, 70% of the vote in the area where the UKIP leader has decided is the best place for him to stand. So that's a sort of a real sort of sub-story that's coming through, the complete collapse of the UKIP vote in favour of the Conservatives.
And with us, a new guest, a fresh face, a fresh pair of ears and eyes, Dick Newby from the Liberal Democrats. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. That's my programme coming out. Good morning to you.
Morning.
Yes, it's the middle of the night, really, isn't it? What do the Lib Dems hope most from this? Because traditionally, local government is a real power base for the Lib Dems, isn't it?
Yes, it has been in the past, and we did very badly during the coalition years. So we're coming back is the answer. We're hoping to get more votes and win a lot more seats, but the night's still young.
And on more than just appealing to the 48% who voted to remain?
Yes, I mean, we've had a lot of local council by-elections over the last 6 months, and we've been picking up seats in quite a lot of Leave areas, particularly in the West Country. We'll have to see what happens tonight, but it's not simply Remainers who've been voting Lib Dem.
Between 3 and 4, Gareth, Tory heartland councils are expected to go even bluer. But if that's the case, does that point to gains over Labour, gains over UKIP, even bluer where it was blue already, just an overriding victory for the Conservatives, do you think, by early morning?
It's looking fairly strong for the Conservatives, but there's not enough seats have come in, particularly in some of the suburban areas, some of the unitary authorities, to really show where that vote's coming from. There's no question in areas where it's Conservative versus UKIP, the UKIP vote is absolutely collapsing and going to the Conservatives. We haven't really seen many sort of key marginal areas between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems yet. I think when we start to see them, that really will become interesting, particularly in places like Cornwall, where there are seats that the Lib Dems used to consider to be their heartland, and the Conservatives just wiped the floor with them at the last general election 2 years ago.
We have seen a couple of classic Conservative Labour marginals, so Harlow and Tamworth, both of which would be historic bellwether marginals. The Conservatives won every single division in both of those areas.
So in Harlow North, that's just come through now. So the Conservatives got 51%, Labour 41%. Labour's up 4%. from 2013. Conservatives up 23%, and that's because the UKIP didn't stand. So they're hoovering up, as I said before, hoovering up the UKIP vote. Labour's taking some of it, but obviously this can be explained by the UKIP vote going to the Tories.
But that could be very crucial in the general election because, as I understand it, there's always talk about a progressive alliance, but there's also talk about UKIP not standing in quite a few marginal seats where the Tory candidate is a firm Brexiteer. So you might find in some Labour marginals where they've got a Tory candidate who supported Brexit, UKIP not standing, the seat goes Tory. Is that a fear in Jeremy Corbyn's office, do you think?
I think during the course of the campaign, Jeremy said from the start that we're going to respect the result of the referendum, and a lot of UKIP voters are Labour to UKIP switchers, or former UKIP voters anyway. So I'm confident that during the course of the campaign we can win some of those UKIP voters back.
Will he respect the result of the general election if it's a landslide for the Tories and a disaster for Labour by leaving?
Well, I think we have to wait and see what happens. I think he's focused on the general election campaign, and I don't think he's really considering what's going to happen after yet, because it's obviously his focus is on delivering the best result possible for Labour.
Harlow is one of those places he's visited in the general election. He was there last Thursday, wasn't he? He went to Harlow to campaign for the general election. We've just won every single division there.
Gareth Wright, just a word on the Metro mayors, because I'm going to speak to Joe Twyman, Head of Political Research at YouGov in a moment. He's in Manchester for that Metro mayoral election there, which I think Andy Burnham is probably expected to win.
Well, there's some people have speculated the Conservatives got an outside shot, but I mean, that is such even the most optimistic person on the planet, even Theresa May in her wildest dreams doesn't believe that she can win that.
And he began campaigning the second Jeremy Corbyn won the first round of that leadership election, didn't he? He just did.
Apparently, I mean, I haven't been to Manchester for quite a few years, actually. I understand the race there is actually quite interesting. It's quite well humoured. It's actually quite an intelligent race. It's much more like a London mayoral race than sorry, I'm going to sound very Londonist, but much more like a London mayoral race than a sort of provincial mayoral race, in that it's actually quite engaging with the public. There was certainly the Conservative candidate put out one of the best political videos I've ever seen recently. So I think that things could... there could be some surprise in terms of the Conservative share of the vote, but there isn't much of a UKIP vote in Manchester, so it's not really reflective of the whole country.
OK, let's bring in Joe Twyman, Head of Political Research at YouGov in Manchester for that particular election. What have the polls been saying, Joe, on this one?
Much in the way of public polling on any of the mayoral races, but it does look like in Manchester, but Liverpool as well, and perhaps Tees Valley, Labour are expected to win. The really interesting one is the West Midlands, where it's looking really close between Labour and the Conservatives, and so if the Conservatives can sneak that one, it will certainly go down well with them. And the mayoral races are interesting when it comes to the general election, because I expect that if I were a Labour strategist, it would be those that I would focus on to provide momentum, in light of the fact that Labour are likely to lose, potentially between sort of 50, 100, maybe 150 seats in the council elections. And so I expect that they will focus on their victories in the mayoral race as a way to get momentum for their campaign.
Because those areas that you mentioned, Manchester, Liverpool and the West Midlands, big industrial heartlands, places with great history, great political history, so actually quite an engaged population, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Liverpool, it has the constituencies that have the highest level of Labour support in the entire country. We're talking about sort of 80% votes. I mean, incredibly high numbers. So if they didn't hold on there, it really would be a surprise. But if Conservatives can take the West Midlands, historically an area that has, if not overwhelming, and certainly lean towards Labour, then that will dampen their enthusiasm. And of course, Cambridge and Peterborough looks like that's going to the Conservatives as well. So it's definitely going to be the mixed picture.
Have you done any polling on the Northern Powerhouse and what it means or does not mean to people?
Well, it's difficult to when you look at that nationally and you ask people what they think of it. There's a confused picture. There's an understanding that it means regeneration for the North, but then of course that causes confusion for those of us in the South about exactly which areas of the North that covers, and also what regeneration means. And so there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding it, and also a relatively large amount of uncertainty about what happens now in the post-Cameron, post-George Osborne era. Those were the guys that began this endeavour. They were the guys that pushed it to begin with. There hasn't been as much focus from Theresa May. I mean, given all the other stuff, we may of course return to it during the election campaign, but there hasn't been so much focus on that as yet. It will be interesting to see whether they revisit it.
Joe, a quick word about Wales. In Merthyr Tydfil, which we would all think of as just natural Labour territory, they won 23 out of 33 seats on the council last time. It's said they're about to lose control. The leader of the council has come fourth in his own ward, which doesn't exactly bode well. Now, you carried out this poll, I think, for ITV Wales last week. Absolutely phenomenal results there. I mean, terrible results for Labour in a sense, and very good for the Conservatives. And it seems from the results that we've seen tonight so far from Wales that poll is being borne out, which must be a relief to you.
Well, I mean, we're always interested in being as accurate as we can. And what was interesting about Wales and the Scotland poll as well is that it showed that in these former heartlands, I mean, Labour has not come behind the Conservatives in Wales since the Second World War, since quite a bit of time before the Second World War, actually. And so to see them behind and by such a margin must be a concern. Because if Labour don't get seats in Wales and then fail to pick up any seats back from the SNP in Scotland, you do have to wonder, okay, well, outside those really strong places, such as Liverpool as discussed, outside those areas, where do the seats come from? And that raises big questions. I expect that Labour in both Scotland and Wales in this set of local elections will be effectively carrying out damage limitation, trying to minimise their losses, as indeed they will be in England.
Well, in Wales so far, the Conservatives are up 8, Labour down 9, and I've just lost the graph. Here we are. No, that's the wrong ones. Anyway, those are the two main parties that we're looking at.
We can go
Wales.
to Cardiff actually and talk to Sean Pritchard, LBC's reporter in Cardiff. When are more results expected there?
Well, we're due some in the next few minutes, hopefully here. Butetown is due to declare, which is part of Cardiff's south. Obviously, counting is well underway here, Sheila, at City Hall in Cardiff, where Labour's been running the show since 2012. But there are fears the party could lose control here due to strong opposition from the Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru and the Welsh Conservatives. And if we look at the bigger picture, as we've been hearing earlier from you just now, some political experts are predicting Labour could lose more than 100 Welsh seats, something that would obviously be a huge kick in the teeth, as it's the biggest party here in Wales with 580 council seats. Labour's obviously already lost its first seat here in Wales and indeed the UK a couple of hours ago at Rosnesny up in Wrexham, which has gone to an independent candidate. And the Shadow Welsh Secretary, Christina Rees, has already admitted this evening times seem very tough for Jeremy Corbyn's party. The Conservatives would point to any gains here in Wales as a good sign ahead of next month's Westminster election, and that could well happen as there are predictions they could gain 50 or more seats. And it'll also be interesting to see if last year's success at the Welsh Assembly elections will have any impact on UKIP's campaign to gain more members in Welsh councils, as they won their first ever seats at the Senedd in Cardiff Bay. The Welsh Lib Dems are hoping a Brexit backlash could result in more council seats for them, especially as they were in charge of a coalition here at City Hall 5 years ago. And if we can just look a bit further afield, Plaid Cymru will be looking to tighten its grip on Carmarthenshire after it wrestled control from Labour 2 years ago to lead a coalition. But not every council here in Wales will be declaring overnight, as counters at 9 of the 22 local authorities will be getting a lie-in, as the full counts won't start until tomorrow morning. We should hopefully have a clearer picture of what's going to happen here in Cardiff from about 4 a.m. onwards. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Sean Pritchard, LBC's reporter in Cardiff.
That's really helpful, a clear picture after 4 o'clock when we finish. Maybe Steve Allen will talk about the Welsh results. Plaid Cymru, interestingly, are up 7 in Wales. Now, that on the face of it looks a really good performance by them until you look at they've got 1.2% of the vote so far. So I don't know where those votes are coming from.
Let me say thank you to Joe Twyman as well, Head of Political Research at YouGov. He was speaking to us from Manchester, talking about those metro mayoral elections. Dick Newby, can I ask you about Cardiff as well? Because high hopes for the Lib Dems there to grab that Remain vote.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a very strong Remain vote in Cardiff. We lost Cardiff Central in the general election, but we've got great hopes of coming back in Cardiff this time. I think it's one of the strongest Remain cities, and we've been seeing great resonance for that in our campaigning there, and as we're starting the campaign for the general election.
What's been fascinating so far this hour, as we wait for more heft, essentially more numbers of results to come in, is hearing you tell us why you voted the way that you voted and whether Brexit was a deciding factor or not. Do keep those calls and thoughts coming. 0345 6060 973 is the number. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC.
A couple of interesting things here, which really fits in with what Gareth was saying earlier about the collapse of the UKIP vote in Lincolnshire. Well, it seems to be happening all over the place. UKIP have lost their first seat of the night on Basildon Council, Basildon Wesley Heights. Now, we heard earlier that Peter Whittle, their deputy leader, he's going to stand in that constituency in the general election. The Tories have gained 2 wards in Gloucestershire, on Gloucestershire County Council from Labour, as the UKIP vote collapsed there. So, Gareth, we are seeing a little bit of a pattern, aren't we?
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I think that as the results come through over the course of the evening, if this is reflected right the way across the country in all the areas where UKIP have been strong, including areas where sort of the more suburban areas, and also some of there's not really many inner city seats, but as near to the urban areas as we can get. See if this UKIP vote is going predominantly in rural areas, whether it's going in urban areas as well, because it's the UKIP vote in the urban areas that has been more from the Labour stock than the sort of disgruntled Conservative stock.
If you have changed how you're voting in these local elections and intend to change how you vote in the general election, I'd love to hear from you on this. How did you vote today, if you did? Did you vote with the general election in mind, and did Brexit influence the decision that you made? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Gavin Barwell from the Conservatives with us till we finish at 4. Matt Zarb-Cousin, ditto Labour media advisor. Gareth Knight, you just heard there, LBC's elections analyst, and Dick Newby for the Lib Dems. Ian Dale and Sheila Fogarty bringing you the overnight local government election results. It's 18 minutes past 1. You can watch us on LBC's Facebook page live, 0345 6060 973, to give us your thoughts on the local election results as they come in and how you voted. Does the general election play on your mind when you vote in local elections? In this particular instance, one following straight on from the other, has Brexit influenced the local elections? Gavin Barwell is here with me from the Conservatives, with me and Ian Dale with you until 4. Matt Zarb-Cousin in for Labour. Gareth Knight, LBC's elections analyst, will bring us some of the results and some assessment of what they might mean, and Dick Newby's here for the Lib Dems as well. Quick text here from Dave in London. I don't think tonight's local results have anything to do with Brexit. They will just reflect on who the electorate wish to lead this country, Corbyn or May, which is something that Theresa May, Gavin Barwell, we've already discussed, is counting on. You mentioned a short while ago how important that new tranche of largely UKIP and certainly Brexit voters were in the referendum. How important is it for all parties, particularly given the state, if you'll forgive me, Matt, the state of the opposition at the moment, to energise voters?
I think it's hugely important. We obviously saw a very high turnout in the referendum last year, and I hope we would all agree that the challenges that the next government will face are very important. The Brexit negotiations, but also ensuring that we keep our United Kingdom together, finishing the job of get this country's public finances back in the black. So we want everybody to have their say in this general election. It's a really important choice as to who's going to run the country for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that what Brexit is doing is has energised some people, but there are a lot of other people for whom Brexit's never been the biggest thing. I mean, for the Lib Dems, we've gained a lot of members and activists because of Brexit. But that's clearly a small minority of the country. And as you go around canvassing, you find people are concerned about all sorts of things. But the dominant thing for most people is whether we've got a realistic opposition to the Theresa May. And they don't see that in Jeremy Corbyn.
But how much is that a bit of a millstone round your neck as a Liberal Democrat, because you were so recently in government with them? So you're on the doorstep, you're speaking to somebody who is dissatisfied with Theresa May, and you say what to them as a Lib Dem?
Well, I think, in a way, the referendum drew a line under that epoch of British history, and people tend to see things through a post-Brexit lens.
Really? Do they? Isn't that wishful thinking?
I think I think that the Conservatives' biggest asset is the perception the public have of Theresa May, and the key word there is perception, because if
Isn't it the perception they have of Jeremy Corbyn?
Because if they trusted Theresa May, if they thought that if they didn't think she was a liability, then they would trust her to debate Jeremy Corbyn. And
well, hang on. She's at 48 to 50% in the polls, and your guy is half that.
And the Conservatives know that if Theresa May were to debate Jeremy Corbyn, Jeremy would win. He would win the debates.
How do you explain the fact that her personal poll ratings are sort of hugely favourable and Jeremy Corbyn's are hugely negative? There has to be an explanation.
She got the highest ever rating in the Ipsos Mori comparison.
But why is that?
I think there's a number of
the British people.
I think there's a number of reasons. Look, she didn't have a bruising leadership contest. She assumed the leadership, sort of coronated. Said Brexit means Brexit. She's going to deliver the result of the referendum, and therefore everyone who's voted for Brexit wants to get behind her. And that's what we're seeing tonight with the UKIP vote switching to the Conservatives. Jeremy, a lot of people have only seen Jeremy through the prism of a very hostile establishment media. And if they were to see him in a debate against Theresa May, they would see that he was a very, very capable person.
Can I ask you, what is the establishment media? Because as a member of the media, who's on the radio every day, I'm guessing you might put me in that mix. For many, many months.
No, because you're regulated by Ofcom.
All right, but for many, well, whether I am or I'm not, for
all of the
many months,
media are regulated by Ofcom. So
who
are you referring to?
I'm talking about the right-wing press. I'm talking about the Sun, the Daily Mail. I'm talking about the Telegraph. These newspapers are effectively the propaganda wing of the Conservative Party.
I think voters, they don't just do what the newspapers they read tell them to do. I think the problem with Matt's argument is basically people have had some time to see Theresa May and to see Jeremy Corbyn, and what he's basically saying tonight is they've got it wrong. And
no, I'm saying
I think the danger for Labour in this general election is that actually people have formed a view. And they've got it right. They've judged these people right. And
for a long time, you were his spokesman for some time. Yeah. For a long time, I can tell you on the ground as a journalist, and it wasn't just my programme. We were reaching out to the New Labour team time and again, and by that I mean inviting them to sit in front of one of these and talk and reach out to the electorate. And time and again, they said no.
Well, Jeremy has appeared on here before. He hasn't.
He's never appeared. No, he hasn't. He's never appeared on this radio station since he's been leader in the studio doing a live interview. He's done a couple of interviews with our reporter, our political editor, Theo Usherwood, on the road. But you and I have had a long discussions about I wanted to get Jeremy on my programme. I think you were in favour of doing that. It never happened. I don't blame you for that. But I find it incredible that a man who used to appear on this radio station every 3 or 4 weeks on my show, always got on really well with him, doesn't think that LBC is a medium or his advisors don't think of LBC as a medium that he should use to communicate with the British people. Because you and I both know that if he came in and did a phone-in, he'd actually be probably rather good at it and can go over the heads of the journalists. So I don't understand, and it's presumably Seamus Milne that is responsible for this, why he won't appear on this radio station.
I think we'll see what happens in the election campaign. I'm sure. I'm sure they've definitely considered him coming on here, and obviously that.
There isn't long left.
No, well, there's 5 weeks left. There's plenty of time.
I haven't given up hope yet.
Hey, look, I mean, it's if the public.
I'll fight you for him.
He's mine.
Not many people say that.
Sorry, Matt. You're being very game. No. But I have to say, I do think it's a problem, not just for close members of the party to Jeremy Corbyn, but I have it out with my listeners on a daily basis. It's bleating. It's just bleating about the media. Open your mouth, speak, represent your politics, sell them to people. That's all he has to do.
Well, I think that the media has its own agenda and it has its own.
You're not going to shift from this, are you?
No, because I've lived it every day. I've seen what they do. I've seen how they distort things. I've seen how they go off on tangents and hone in on little trivialities. So come on live radio
and have nothing distorted.
That's why I'm here. But
Yeah, but you're not the leader of the Labour Party. He needs to be here.
Well, no, look, I hope he will be.
Why is it that, having asked repeatedly over the last few days the Labour press office to put up an official spokesperson. Now, we had Emily Thornbury in for 3/4 for now. We had Andrew Gwynn, but they weren't able to give us anyone else. I understand Sky News had exactly the same problems in getting Labour spokespeople onto Sky News. Now, I don't think that you would think that Sky News was part of a sort of deliberate media agenda to get Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think you think we are.
No, I haven't said that at all, no. And, I can't speak for the Labour press office. I don't work there anymore. But what I would say is that the media do have its own agenda. They frame things in a certain way. And if the public have only seen Jeremy through the prism of the media, of the print media, sorry, I should qualify.
Please do.
then they're going to get a very distorted impression of him. I think that if they saw him debate Theresa May, they'd change their minds about him.
So Jeremy Corbyn won't interact with journalists. Theresa May won't interact with members of the public.
I mean, that's true. Theresa May out canvassing with me, interacting with members of the public, and I think you're going to see a lot of that during the campaign. She's actually travelled far more widely around the country.
What was going on in
Jeremy
Cornwall the
has
other
so
day
far.
when she was whisked in and out of a building in a car, and the local press were practically kidnapped and locked in a room so that they couldn't film her emergence and her arrival. I mean, that's control freakery, isn't it?
I haven't seen that particular event, but look, I'm sure that you'll find in this general election, Theresa May is travelling right across the country and will give the opportunity for as many people as possible to engage with her. You've got to do that partly through the media, exactly as you were just you both suggesting, but also through constituency visits. There's a whole range of ways in which politicians can
trips to the
do
woods
that.
in
I think
Scotland.
if you talk to any Conservative candidate, they would tell you we are really keen to have Theresa May spend time in our constituency and engaging with our voters, because the message we get back consistently is she's the person that people want to provide strong and stable leadership.
Would she do something that I know Margaret Thatcher did, which was to go on evening television, national evening television, and take questions from a studio audience?
I'm not going to make commitments for her this evening
But
in
why
terms of
wouldn't
which particular
she? Why
programme
wouldn't
she'd
all
do.
of them?
I'm sure the people running our election campaign will want to get maximum exposure for her, because
here's
she's a huge asset.
Here's a text.
Hang on.
I was going to say,
just
even
quickly,
Vladimir Putin takes questions from an audience over
for 4 hours.
For 4 hours. I mean,
yes, but they've all had their fingernails
week,
pulled out before they went into the room.
Oji on a text says, Ian, have you invited Theresa May to come to LBC to answer questions without scripts? Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, if we don't get Theresa May for an interview on this radio station, or at least one, if not two, she'll have some very unhappy people, and we will call her out on that. Because, I mean, I agree with you, Matt, that I think it is a disgrace, and I said it on my show regularly, that she isn't going to do television debates. I know, Gavin, you can't sort of say you agree with me, even if you do, but I just don't understand how you can call an election on a single issue and then refuse to debate it. Fine, she can do interviews, fine, she can appear in front of audiences and all the rest of it, but in the end, the British people, Matt is absolutely right, want to judge who will make the best Prime Minister. Now, they have to make their judgment without the benefit of seeing them come head-to-head. And it's not good enough just to say, oh, well, I debate Jeremy Corbyn every week in Prime Minister's Question Times. Not in a general election, she doesn't.
I was just about to say that she's been debating Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, you've learned the script.
I personally, and this is just my own private view, I think that the election debates, the last election, you pitch whoever's the Prime Minister up against a whole series of other people. I don't think it added a great deal of light.
No, I don't
to the
think it
campaign.
did. But if it had been Ed Miliband against David Cameron, it might have
But then
done.
you're going to have arguments if you try and...
Gavin, in 2010, David Cameron badgered Gordon Brown every day for the debates, right? And then Gordon Brown said, OK, I'll do them. And then in 2015, he had to agree to some kind of modified version of them, even though he didn't debate Ed Miliband head-to-head. And now it's part of the fabric, it's part of the general election process. The general election, you have the debates. And really, as Ian said, it's not good enough. You call a general election, you can't duck out of the debates.
What would your, I have to say former constituents now, what would they think if you suddenly, in this general election campaign, refused to debate your opponents in your constituency?
I think for most constituents, what they're most concerned about is that you turn up on their doorstep and you speak to them, actually face to face. Very few people, you've stood yourself for Parliament in the past, very, very few people turn up at Hustings meetings,
true
and those that do have made up their
in
mind
local
long
hustings,
before
it's
they come.
generally the party members that turn
Exactly.
out, along with three men and a dog. And the dog has just wandered in.
What I would love to hear now from our listeners, we have to go to the headlines in a sec, but what I'd love to hear from you, the people up in the middle of the night listening to all of this, where do you get your information from? Is it this mythical evil press that Matt is talking about? Is it from the radio? Is it from the television? Is it from debates? Is it on your phone? Is it Twitter? Where is it these days that you get your political information
Ian Dale
from?
at Drive.
Ian Dale at Drive, of course. LBC all day, 0345 6060 973. We're with you till 48485. You're listening to Sheila Fogarty and Ian Dale. Sniggering a little bit, Ian.
Indeed, and you can see
share?
my lovely producer Jagruti
Yes.
here if you're on Facebook Live. She's now immediately left.
She's running away.
She was setting up my Facebook. What was she doing? Setting up a Google document so I can see something.
I think we should let people in a little on the, behind the wall kind of.
Go on then.
Is that that's not the expression, is it? But anyway,
behind the scenes.
It's the middle of the night, so I can no longer think straight. But Ian tried to take my iPad away from me. and that was tantamount to child abductions. So that's basically what we've been sniggering about. Anyway, Yaya has called from Swansea. Keep your calls coming. 0345 6060 973. How did you vote? Did you vote? Did Brexit play a part? Did it reflect how you intend to vote in the general election? Yayan, in Swansea, important results coming from Wales not that long from now, about an hour from now. How did you vote, if you're prepared to share it with us, Yayan?
Well, I did go to vote. I was going to vote UKIP, but there wasn't a UKIP candidate on the ballot. But I just wanted to say that in South Wales, as you've said, it's always been a Labour stronghold. But now when you're walking around town, everyone's talking about UKIP. And in particular, the right, it's just people can't bring themselves to vote Tory because they're still bitter about the Thatcher closing the mine.
So you'll vote UKIP, but you won't vote Tory because the Tories are toxic and UKIP aren't?
Well, I actually voted Tory today through gritted teeth, but I think it has been fueled, the drift has been fueled by Brexit, in the sense that people are interested in politics again. Labour survived in South Wales like a religion, in the sense that we were all indoctrinated from a young age. You've got to vote Labour. I remember my grandmother saying, you've got to vote Labour because they're the only ones that care about us.
And when did that change for you? When did you suddenly, or even perhaps it wasn't sudden, when did you think, actually, I don't believe they care for me?
Well, it was when the referendum was running, and I started to look into politics. Before that, I just didn't really care. I know a lot of other people felt the same. When I'm speaking to people, when I go for a drink, I'm speaking to a lot of people that didn't vote before the referendum. And, now they're looking into it. And I think our pride is back, along with our independent thought. But we're sick of the victim politics that's coming from Labour.
What do you mean by that?
It's like when you listen to Jeremy Corbyn, it's like, these nasty rich people somewhere hitting you down with a hammer and keeping you on the floor. And, we're starting to see that, it's not other people's fault. The rich people are giving us the jobs. We want to work again. We're driven again.
Well, I think that there's a lot of problems in this country. There's a housing crisis. The NHS is in crisis. There's a lot of things. I mean, look, it can sound like as you describe it, victim politics. But really, what the Labour Party is trying to do now is address a lot of the issues that this Conservative government's caused. And I think what it comes down to is a question of choices. And do you want to choose to cut taxes for the richest, or do you want to choose to fund the NHS? And that's what it comes down to. That's what politics is. And I think what Jeremy's shown, I think, and what he will show certainly in this election campaign, is that he's on the side of the people.
Do you not think though that Yayan's got a point there, that Labour has got a difficulty in that it's not seen as the party of aspiration, whereas under Tony Blair it was. He appealed to the big sort of centre ground of British politics that was full of people who weren't envious of people who were richer than they were. They wanted to be those people, and they aspired to be those people. They aspired to be successful. And all we hear from the Labour Party nowadays is doom and gloom and how terrible the country is and how it's all the fault of terrible rich people. And there's no sort of sunny uplands. I made this point to John McDonnell the other day, and I said, look, we need to hear some positive vision from you. We're not hearing it at the moment.
I think there's a real misunderstanding about the appeal of the Labour Party, to particularly the new members and supporters and people of my generation. We're not revolutionary socialists or Trotskyists or anything like that. We want what our parents had. We want a home, a secure job, and it's kind of small c conservative things. We just want what our parents had. So, I think that the fact that we're not doing as well as our parents' generation, we're not, we're the first generation to do worse than their parents' generation. That is a real problem, and only someone like Jeremy Corbyn, who's going to shake up the system, is going to be able to solve it.
See, I think actually, if you take my area of housing, the actual policy that Jeremy's offering is the opposite of that. It exactly feeds into what Ian said about aspiration. Because what you've said is we're going to build 1 million homes. That's our existing target, 1 million homes. But half of them are going to be council homes. So actually there's absolutely a housing crisis at the moment because we've not been building enough homes, not just for a few years, for 30 or 40 years. But whereas what most people want is an affordable home they can buy so that they can live the same kind of quality of life that their parents had, what you're offering them is actually fewer homes for people to buy, higher house price inflation, and lots of council homes.
Gavin Ball, we talked about this just a week or so ago on my programme with you. You do accept there are some people who don't have that aspiration because they realise it is impossible for them.
We absolutely,
and those people need social housing.
We need to build more social housing, we need to build more private rented housing, and we need to build more homes for people to buy. But what I'm saying is what Jeremy's actually offering at this election is fewer homes for people to buy, and therefore higher house price inflation, plus 500,000 council homes. That is not addressing the aspiration agenda that Ian was talking about, nor is it actually doing what you said, which is ensuring that this generation can have the same quality as their parents.
For many people, a decent home is an aspiration. Buying a house isn't a human right. For many people at the bottom of the income scale, they want a decent home, which they do not currently have. And unless you build a lot of social housing, probably including some council housing, many families at the bottom end of the income scale will not even have a decent.
But
80%
how does
building houses just for sale help that?
But 80% of people aspire to own their own homes. If we're talking about everyone should have a decent home, but 80% of people aspire to own their own home, and this is a policy that is going to make it harder for people to do that, not easier.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why I disagree. Because if you live in a house for social rent, you have the means then to save for a deposit, and then you can buy a house. If you want to make every house privately owned and buy to let, then all you're going to end up doing is paying more out in housing benefit, because people are renting and rents are out of control, and then you end up having to house them in private accommodation rather than in the social housing, which the state owns.
If you build fewer homes for people to buy, house prices will accelerate even further, and it'll be harder and harder.
I'd love to devote the rest of this programme to a housing debate. We're not going to. Very interesting result in from Nuneaton, which was that constituency. It was the Basildon of the 2015 election. It was the one where we all thought, that's it for Ed Miliband. David Cameron's going to win. Well, there's a ward result here. Conservative gain from Labour. Labour 24%, down from 36%. Conservative 76%, up from 36%. UKIP didn't stand. They got 28% last time. So virtually the entire UKIP vote has gone to the Conservatives. Gareth Knight, what other results are you seeing across the country?
Well, I've just been having a quick flick through some of the Welsh results, and the general pattern seems to be fairly positive for the Conservatives, but not overwhelmingly so. Certainly it doesn't seem to be a particularly great night for Labour. I mean, Plaid Cymru last time lost 41 seats, so I think that we had a figure about half an hour ago said they gained 7. That's actually quite a decent clawback for this early on in the evening, given that given that there's so many results still to come in. Couple of just on the Nuneaton point, there's an interesting thing there is the clearly a percentage of the Labour vote going to the Conservatives as well. That's also quite critical, because the Conservatives will not get a landslide just by getting UKIP votes.
And just on that, Labour's general election candidate for Nuneaton, he's lost his council seat, and reports people saying Corbyn putting them off voting Labour. Now again, Matt, this is not the odd person that's saying this. This is quite a lot of people within your own party. Now, I've got no idea whether this guy is a wicked Blairite or not, but you have to accept that there is now a general feeling that that Jeremy Corbyn is radioactive, to quote somebody else earlier in the evening, on the doorstep.
Well, I think Jeremy's approval ratings will get a lot better as the campaign goes on.
Why do you feel so confident in that?
Because I think that the public have seen him through the prism of a very biased printed press.
I want to bring,
That's why.
On that issue, I want to bring Gregor in from Marylebone, because you want to comment on that notion that Jeremy Corbyn gets this evil press deal. What do you make of it, Gregor?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I work from home, and, the big, obviously, I'm easily distracted, so I've got one of my screens set up on various, news things and Twitter and stuff. And if you look around, there's plenty of left-wing outlets out there that kind of give a fairly pro-Corbyn attitude. I mean, you've got The Guardian, you've got The Mirror, you've got all sorts of Labour List, you've got all sorts of things like that. So it's not that the media, the pro-Corbyn media doesn't exist. It's just people don't want to listen to it or read it. They prefer the Times and the Telegraph.
Which people?
Well,
centre ground voters, is that what you mean?
If you look at the readership figures, it suggests that, in terms of readership, the Guardian's hammered by the Telegraph and the Times and stuff like that.
That is a fair point, I think, because it is interesting that if you look at the circulation of the Sun and the Mirror, I mean, they're both sort of the same style of paper. They clearly have a different editorial point of view, though the Sun, of course, supported Labour in 97, 2001 and 2005, I think. But the Sun has a massive readership. You look at the readership of the Daily Mail, it is a massive readership. Now, in a sense, instead of traducing those newspapers, Matt, surely your party should be trying to get them back on side and appealing to the people who read those newspapers.
Well, I think in order to do that, you'd have to compromise your principles and your ideology and what you believe in. And that's not something that obviously Jeremy's prepared to do. And that's obviously one of his real strengths, I think, and something that's been missing in politics for a long time.
And Gregor, where do you get your political information from?
Well, I mean,
Ian Dale at Drive.
Stop it. Go on, Gregor.
So typically, Twitter.
Really?
Well, I mean, bluntly, it updates every 10 seconds, not every day. I mean, don't get me wrong, right? The Times and The Guardian are both quite useful for, long read stuff. But in terms of breaking news, you just can't beat Twitter.
And and are you selective about who you follow on Twitter?
Well, selective but broad. I mean, I, as it happens, follow Matt, but I also follow Ian.
Follow me?
Well,
yeah.
What's going on here?
Don't sound so surprised. I follow you as well.
Gregor? Why don't you follow me? Why don't you follow Gavin Barwell? Didn't you? Gareth, come on.
We're more interesting.
Okay.
well, you can only follow so many people.
No, Gregor, I expect to see you bright and early tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, following me on Twitter.
You've just got an extra follower, Sheila.
Or there'll be trouble. 0345 606 0973 is the number to call. Give us your thoughts on the results coming in and how you voted, perhaps, and how you make up your mind in elections like this. Is Brexit looming large? 84850, the number to text. And you can tweet. Yes, you can, Gregor. You can tweet at LBC or at Sheila Fogarty. Never mind that silly Ian Dale nonsense. 147.
LBC at the weekend.
Welcome back to the programme. It's Sheila Fogarty and Ian Dale with you until 4. The results are starting to come in thick and fast now. Gareth Knight, our elections analyst, is obviously still with us because we'd be lost without him. What are the totals looking like? Because it seems to me as though if you look at, I'm getting some of these figures from the Britain Elects Twitter feed, and in terms of gains, the Conservatives are up 42, Labour down 25, Lib Dems down 7, Independents up 3, UKIP down 13. Again, that's only on the basis of 150 wards coming in so far. But is that enough to give us an indication of what's likely to happen at the end of tomorrow?
Not quite yet, but it's certainly, it's certainly not looking great for Jeremy Corbyn, and it's looking okay for Theresa May. The thing is, what we haven't seen yet are the big numbers. 4 years ago, Ed Miliband gained 291 seats in the English county elections. This is just England, so it doesn't even include Scotland and Wales. And David Cameron lost 335 seats. So really, Theresa May needs to be getting those 335 seats back to actually realistically say this has been a very good evening. And if she gets those back and expands,
that's a pretty high hurdle, right?
It's a very high.
That's taking you back to where we were in opposition against Gordon Brown in a mid-term election, when we 7 years into government.
When we saw an election that was then lost a year later by David Cameron. He didn't win that election, whereas Theresa May is expected to get a landslide majority in 5 weeks' time. So therefore, it's not that high a hurdle.
It's pretty remarkable for governments to get back to where they were in mid-term elections in opposition when they're in government.
I don't remember Margaret Thatcher ever winning mid-term elections.
But this isn't a mid-term election.
Well, it is. It is. It's two. No. Well, okay, maybe, but it's still 2 years after the last election.
In the last fortnight.
Yeah.
This is a very peculiar election because it's an election campaign that's taken part in 2 phases. Up to the election being called, I spent the best part of a week in Cornwall, lots of discussion about things happening in Cornwall. Now it's very largely a preview of the general election. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I have some bad news for you, sadly, Dick Newby. The Lib Dems fight back in Somerset appears not to be going to plan so far. They've just lost 4 seats to the Conservatives.
Well, they've lost 4 seats, I suspect, a Conservative UKIP alliance, in effect, because all the
how is it
because
an alliance?
the UKIP votes have gone en bloc to the Tories.
But that's not an alliance.
Okay,
that's just people making an individual decision to vote for a different party.
Okay. Well, but why do they feel so comfortable in doing it?
Because they trust Theresa May on Brexit, presumably.
Because she is adopting not just their policy, but increasingly their language.
She's adopting what people voted for in a referendum.
No, she's not.
Matt? I have to say, though, obviously, I hope that Labour can gain some of those UKIP votes in the course of the general election campaign. But it is very welcome that UKIP are collapsing and they're dead, to be honest. And
Don't speak too soon. Don't speak too soon.
They're doing it to the detriment of your party, aren't they?
But it, as I say, I hope that Labour will gain some of those votes in the general election campaign. But that's because every party, even the Lib Dems, have accepted the result of the referendum, and that was the right thing to do. And Jeremy has been very clear on that, and even Farron now saying he supports soft Brexit or whatever it is. So he's not against Brexit either. So
he does cross his fingers behind his back when he says it.
He says he accepts, not supports.
We say we accept the results of the referendum.
He called him. Didn't he say he was a Eurosceptic?
Is it on the outcome?
Didn't he say he was a Eurosceptic the other day as well? Though I think
partly a Eurosceptic, yeah.
I think we've got to remember when the Liberal Democrats made their big gains in the late 80s and the 90s. One of the things that they were exceptionally good at was targeting people who were disenfranchised from politics. People that thought that they didn't want to be represented by politicians; they wanted to be represented by community activists. The same demographic that the Liberal Democrats used to target are now the people that UKIP have targeted. So it's all very well and good to say that UKIP are going to the Conservatives. That may be, but that's because the demographic that the Liberal Democrats used to see as their core, the disenfranchised, are now voting not just for UKIP, but now have gone to the Conservatives. This is actually a Liberal Democrat failure, and I think to a large extent, a lot of that is to do with the fact that they're obsessed with the referendum issue, and that's not what makes the Liberal Democrats successful. The Liberal Democrats are at their best when they present themselves as a community activist party.
But hasn't everything changed? Are you confident that you're not overdoing it on the Brexit front, Nick?
Well, we're not just fighting on the Brexit front, but it's something that we feel very strongly about. We have a very clear policy on. 48% of the people voted not to leave the European Union, and the government's chosen a very harsh form of Brexit, which will damage the economy.
They've actually just chosen Brexit.
No, they've chosen a particularly harsh form of Brexit by deciding to come out of the single market.
That's Brexit.
If you're still in the single market, then you've still got free movement. You've still got the ECJ making law. The control of our decisions are being made that are not being made by our parliament. That's not hard Brexit. That is just Brexit.
Nick Clegg told us during the referendum campaign that if we came out of the European Union, we would be coming out of the single market, as did David Cameron, as did George Osborne. It wasn't a surprise to
me. The interesting thing is, they said that was likely to happen. Many of the Brexiters didn't, like Dan Hannan didn't,
before the
campaign. David Davis didn't before the campaign.
During the campaign, the leaders of Vote Leave, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, made it abundantly clear that we would be leaving the single market, as did Nigel Farage. So don't please try and tell us that it came as a surprise to you.
Hang on, where does our cake and eat it fit into that?
I've no idea. You
Boris
tell me.
Johnson, we can have our cake and eat it.
But Nigel,
forget what people say.
He would be perfectly happy with a Norwegian-style outcome.
Well, Nigel Farage isn't the Prime Minister, is he?
No, but you're just quoting him as somebody who had a big
during the
influence
campaign, he said that we should come out of the single market.
He didn't.
Anyway, let's go to a call.
We have a caller.
Anna
Save us from ourselves.
Anna is in Hersham. Hello, Anna.
Hello, good evening.
Hi,
Hello.
What would you like to say?
It was really, I was calling in response to Sheila's question about, how do we get our views on the election? How do we make our decisions? What news outlets we're using? I'm a digital user. I'm stuck to my handset, my smartphone. And I have quite a broad selection of The Guardian, the Mail, the Express. I'm very varied in what I look at. So I don't buy newspapers, but I do get drawn into the headlines, and then you can very easily make up your mind once you get into the article of how they're trying to steer your thoughts. So I think most people can see through the headline grabbers.
And I think the other point to make is that often if you just consume your news through social media, people will often just follow people that they agree with, or they'll follow news organisations that they think they agree with. This is particularly true in the United States, where if you are on the hard right of politics in the United States, you will follow Fox News, but you won't follow CNN. And I don't know whether that's happening here. I mean, I like to follow all sorts of different people because I think you do need to get a broad view. Then you can make up your mind.
Well, I think it happens sadly more often with voters than any of us might like to think. I mean, as journalists, as politicians, we're going to be reading a whole range of things. But I had a taxi journey in Liverpool just the other day, and the stuff that a very nice, pleasant man was saying some very unpleasant, not very nice things about the country that we live in, and I challenged him gently and politely. And by the end of that journey,
that's Sheila Fogarty, aren't you?
No, but by the end of that journey, I was absolutely determined to have that man reading something other than wherever the hell he was getting these ideas from. It was phenomenal.
Ian Dale's blog. That's not a bad read, didn't you?
I said 0345 6060 973.
We have a bit of news
from Warwickshire.
From Lincolnshire.
Oh, well, go Lincolnshire.
The
and
Conservatives, according to the Lincolnite, so it must be true, the Conservatives have regained overall control of Lincolnshire County Council. That fits in with what Gareth Knight was telling us earlier, particularly in the Boston area.
We have in Warwickshire as well.
Have you got overall control, or just taking it from no overall
taking
control?
it from no overall control, with the number of seats still to be
Because
declared.
the majority of the county councils are actually under no overall control. There are actually rather few of them that have Conservative or Labour control.
And Matt, again, I don't mean to depress you any more than we absolutely have to this evening.
That's so cruel.
The chairman of the Labour group on Warwickshire County Council has lost his seat this morning.
I said that about 20 minutes ago.
I know, but people are listening at different times. Don't stop picking on me. The Jeremy Corbyn style has been putting them off voting Labour. It looks as though, on the basis of the key wards so far, that there is a very strong swing from Labour to the Conservatives compared with 2013. And as far as we can see, the UKIP votes that are going elsewhere, obviously not all of them will be, but the UKIP votes that are going elsewhere are heading largely in the direction of the Conservatives on the basis of the results we have so far. At least one caller, though, Matt, rang to tell us he was going from UKIP to Labour. So there's something.
Plenty more, I'm sure.
There's something. Stay with LBC throughout the morning. Ian and I are with you until 4 with our guests. Gavin Barwell from the Conservatives, Matt Zaab-Cousin is here from the Labour Party, Gareth Knight, LBC's election analyst, and we have Dick Newby here with us from the Liberal Democrats. We want to hear from you very much as well. 84850, the number to text. You can tweet at LBC or call 0345 6060 973.
Very good morning to you. It's 2:03. Lots happening on the political scene tonight. It's the local elections, obviously. That's why Sheila Fogarty and I are here, and Darren Adam isn't.
Yeah, we haven't just forgotten to go home.
No, indeed. Mark Pack, the Liberal Democrat blogger, he has tweeted something very interesting. He says, remember, if Labour loses seats overall, it'll be the first time since records began that the official opposition has lost seats 3 years in a row. That's the sort of tweet that only a Lib Dem political geek could actually tweet. But it's actually quite helpful for our discussion. Gareth Knight is here, elections analyst. Let's just spend a couple of minutes going through what's happened so far and what's likely to happen in the next hour, because we are likely to get some full council results. We think we've had Lincolnshire, we think we've had Warwickshire, both Conservative gains from no overall control. But what's happening in Wales? What's happening in the other English county councils?
So far, what we can see, especially in England, is the UKIP vote collapsing and going to the Conservatives. Lincolnshire in particular, where Paul Nuttall will be standing at the general election in 5 weeks. That area has switched from being fairly good for UKIP to being pretty appalling for UKIP, and the Conservatives are just mopping up the UKIP vote. We'll wait to see what's happening with the Labour vote, but indications are there is some swing from Labour to the Conservatives. But we've got to remember this is low turnout.
Yeah, and it's not. It's worth saying as well that to say we're seeing a collapse of UKIP in this particular set of elections isn't to overstate it. They have lost every single one of the 9 seats they were trying to defend.
And these were seats that they held with relatively comfortable majorities. I mean, they're relatively comfortable. But it's the size of the majorities that the Conservatives have now got. In some cases, going from a UKIP majority, say 100 votes, to a Conservative majority of 1,200 votes. This is a big swing. In Wales, things are mixed and all over the place with some of the areas, but there's some talk on social media that Labour could lose Merthyr Tydfil, which would be almost the equivalent to when the Conservatives lost Tunbridge Wells. And I remember the general shock when it came up on the screen, Conservatives gained Tunbridge Wells. It was like, how on earth did they ever lose it? And the idea that Labour could potentially lose Merthyr Tydfil would be the equivalent of that.
And let me just remind you who's with us here in the studio. Dick Newby from the Lib Dems, and I'm afraid your revival, no evidence of it yet. Who knows? There's plenty of time. Go on.
Well, we've won more seats in England than the Labour Party to date this evening, which is quite an amazing thing. I don't think we've done that for quite a while.
Okay. Dick Newby from the Lib Dems with us until 4 as well, as is Gareth Knight, whose voice you heard a moment ago, LBC's elections analyst. Matt Zaab-Cousin, former Labour media advisor for Jeremy Corbyn, is here as well, and Gavin Barwell from the Conservatives. I think you wanted to come in just a moment ago.
I want to pick up on a Welsh point. So the feedback I'm getting from Wrexham is that the Conservatives are likely to overtake Labour on Wrexham County Council, and that the swing there is far more than we would require to pick up the Clwyd South and Wrexham seats at the general election. So the results there look very encouraging in an area that will be a key battleground in the general election.
Now, you know, there are people listening all over the world, not just in the UK tonight. Peter, I think, probably takes the record as the listener furthest away from the UK. He's phoned in from China. Hello, Peter. Peter.
Hello, hi. Yeah, I'm calling from Shenyang in northeast China.
And what are you making of British democracy at its best?
Really, because I was asking, where people gather their information from nowadays. What sources they use, and I honestly believe that the electorate are far more canny than people give them for. We gather information from all sorts of sources, and that's certainly the case in the referendum campaign and the local elections. And all too often, it's always off as being, just we believe whatever the press happens to us. And nothing's further from the truth. I mean, I'm evidence of that. I mean, I'm in China, but I'm still listening to your debate.
Well, I'm glad that we've breached the Great Firewall of China.
Yeah, I mean, one of the frustrating things is that obviously Labour is in absolute collapse. And they lose what credibility they have ever had because of being in complete denial. If there was some recognition of what their problem actually was, then you might start to give them some credit. But it's just complete denial.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Peter was on a Skype line, so hence there was a little bit of a break-up there. I come to Matt Saab Cousin to answer one or two of those points in a second. But UKIP are apparently saying they may have lost all 13 seats that they hold in Lincolnshire. Matt, what's your response to Peter there? Well, are you in denial?
No, I mean, if you accept that a free press is crucial to a functioning democracy, then you have to accept that it has influence over people, and it's not just mood music or background noise. It actually has influence, and people aren't engaged with politics outside of a general election campaign or outside of a referendum campaign, and I do agree with the caller. People do read up on things themselves, they do their own research, and they are more canny than a lot of people give them credit for, obviously. But that only happens usually during an election campaign. So I think when we see a more engaged electorate and we see more of Jeremy on the TV, people paying more attention to what he's saying, and hopefully, I hate to say it again, but the debates, then we might see them change their mind.
But you're whistling in the wind on that, because they're not going to happen, are they? I mean, let's face it, she's not going to change her mind on that, because Linton Crosby won't let her.
Well,
she's changed her mind on everything else, hasn't she?
Yeah, I don't think she's ever kept a promise, has she?
She has,
biting political satire.
No election. Oh, well, let's have an election.
Let's have a result. The Lib Dems have gained St Albans North from Labour on Hertfordshire County Council. Now, that's quite interesting. St Albans traditionally has always been a seat that the Liberal Democrats have wanted to win. They've always had quite a strong candidate there, Sandy Walkington, I think his name is. Isn't it? Oh, I shouldn't even know that. But again, have we seen evidence of any Labour gains at all tonight, Gareth? Because I think I remember one in Wales, and that was about it.
Yeah, there was a gain from an independent, I believe, in Wales. I mean, there's been nothing substantial. We've got to remember these are local elections. There will always be local issues at play. But I mean, just to pick up on, are local elections important? The answer is absolutely, categorically yes. If you are
just
able
as well
to,
as we've been here for 6 hours.
No, for the Labour Party, fundamentally, it is practically impossible for someone to win a general election without having a very, very solid base of councillors. But there has been some criticism earlier on of previous leaders. Michael Gove said, until David Cameron came along, the Conservatives didn't perform that well in elections. That was actually simply untrue. The most successful leader of the Conservative Party in the Blair years was actually William Hague, who gained over 1,300 council seats in 1999, 2 years after the previous general election.
Well.
Let me bring in Romeo.
But it built a foundation of party activists that were going to go out on the doorstep and build up to the point where, granted, it took them another 16 years, they eventually got a majority. Unless Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is able to focus on winning council seats, they're never going to have the ground troops to be able to win a general election.
Let me bring Romeo in from Liverpool. Never thought I'd say that. Romeo, I know where you are. What do you want to say?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, the thing is, I called up because I have always voted Conservative, apart from in the last election. when I believed that UKIP had a better chance of gaining the Labour seat in Liverpool, because in Liverpool it's a safe Labour seat. And when I was in school, I got told that I had to vote Labour.
Who by?
Because I told my teacher. We were in.
Where did you go to school?
I don't know what I should say. Or
Yeah, go on. Go on.
Yeah.
No one's listening. It's 2 o'clock.
It's too late. No one's listening. Yeah, it was Savio High School, which is now Savio Salesian College. And my form teacher, I said that I would rather vote Conservative, and she was like, "You can't vote Conservative. You're from Liverpool. You need to vote Labour."
Shocking.
And I believe that is
not
the sort
surprising
of mentality that people from Liverpool kind of get stuck with, because they're getting told in school.
Yeah.
They're getting taught that they need.
Well, hang on, Romeo.
Your kin and whatever.
My kith and kin.
Yeah.
Romeo, how old are you, Romeo?
I'm 29.
You're a lot younger than me then. I'm 31.
Sorry, I shouldn't have laughed so loud.
Was everybody laughing? I can't explain that. But Romeo, I don't know how things have changed since my day there, but it was not typical for for school teachers to tell them how to vote. My own experience was entirely different, because when I came of age politically, if you see what I mean, was a sixth former and thinking about politics properly for the first time, it was when Derek Hatton and his chums were holding sway in Liverpool. And if anything was going to put you off the left, it would have been Derek Hatton. And I have to say, my school harnessed that experience very well to get us focused on politics generally, that nobody took anybody into a room and beat them and told them to vote Labour.
Wasn't it the nuns?
Yeah, they were lovely guitar-toting nuns,
Okay,
man. They were very nice. And there were Salesians as well, actually, Romeo, so
Whatever
we've got more
means.
in common than you think. It doesn't matter, as
Yeah.
long as Romeo and I know. But the point is, no teacher should say that, should they?
No, that's the whole point. And I have my view. And yes, at a very early age. At that time, I was very pro-EU and pro-Euro, and I wanted the UK to have things like that.
And it's a lonely place to be in Liverpool on voting day as a Tory, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, obviously today we had the mayor elections and things like that. So I voted, but I don't know whether I can say who I voted for. Or
Of course you can.
It's entirely free to say what you wish.
But I voted Conservative as my first choice and UKIP as my second choice. There's no possible way on God's green earth I would ever vote Labour or Lib Dem. So I know my votes are wasted, because it will be Steve Rotham who wins.
You see, I don't think any vote is...
your vote's
No
not
vote
wasted.
is ever wasted. I mean, even though if you know what the result is going to be, or you think you know what the result is going to be, you still cast your vote. You've had your say.
That's what I wanted to get out there and make sure that my voice was heard. So I voted. But the thing is, it's never going to kind of change anything in Liverpool, because of people who are in that mindset.
Well, look at Ruth Davidson. See what she's doing in Scotland.
Just on what Romeo said about teachers, I had a bit of a similar experience to him when I was in the sixth form back in Essex in 1979-80.
So you're 31 as well then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We had a new teacher who came in as our history teacher, and in his first 6 weeks, everyone thought that, and bear in mind sort of North Essex, pretty sort of conservative area, everyone thought he was a communist. And he actually had to make a public statement in front of the assembly, because apparently kids had gone home and told their parents that he was a communist.
I'm being taught by communists.
And he had to make a statement at an assembly to say, no, I'm not a communist. He's actually one of the most brilliant teachers I've ever had.
That's awful, isn't it, to have to
absolutely.
What sort of McCarthyist school did you go to?
Saffron Walden County High.
Listen, Romeo, I'm told that Paul Nuttall went to your school. Is that a link you know? Yeah.
Well, I was actually part of the Vote Leave campaign, and I was doing the campaigning in Liverpool and things like that. Paul Nuttall actually tweeted a picture of me, him, and a few others whilst we were in Liverpool campaigning for Leave.
Do you wear tweed as well?
Sorry?
Do you wear tweed as well?
No, I don't. No.
It's a funny old look on the streets of Liverpool, isn't it? No, not really. No, it's
a bit odd.
Only on the rural outskirts, Ian, where that kind of clothing is necessary. Oh God, it's not rural. Trust me. Romeo, great to talk to you.
Yeah, it was a great call. Stephen Bush from the New Statesman, who's just tweeted, "Conservatives gain Lincolnshire. I need a drink."
I'm having a cup of tea.
Yes.
We'll come back to you in a moment with our guests here in the studio, Ian Dale and myself, with you till 4 o'clock this morning. Gavin Barwell for the Conservatives is here. Matt Zarb-Cousin for Labour. Gareth Knight, LBC's elections analyst, is here for the analysts. And Dick Newby from the Liberal Democrats. It's 16 minutes past 2. It is. Jolie has called from Stockwell to talk to me, to Ian, and to our guest Gavin Barwell, Matt Zarb-Cousin, Gareth Knight, LBC's elections analyst, and Dick Newby here for the Liberal Democrats. Jolie, good morning to you.
Hello.
Hello. Did you vote? Oh no, you're in Stockwell. There wasn't a vote, was there, in Stockwell?
No vote here. But I was phoning to say I don't think the results of today's elections are going to be really very reflective of the actual general election results. And I think that's for a few reasons. One of the important reasons is I think that young people won't have voted today. And young people don't vote in local elections. I want in these. I bet it's not that high. And I think young people don't vote in local elections, but they're much more likely to vote in the general election. And so they're not going to marry these figures. I think lots of people are just registering now, young people.
Well, I don't want to disappoint. When you might be right in 4 weeks' time, but as things stand this evening, and we do still have a lot of votes to come in, but as things stand this evening, the results are certainly reflecting what the polls are saying about the general election.
Yeah. A lot of talk about the polls, so actually not.
Jolie, I'm going to leave it there if I may, because your line isn't very strong. It's breaking up. But thank you very much for the point that you made, particularly about young people voting. Brendan has called from Beckenham. Hi, Brendan.
Hello there. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Excellent. My point was really just about Jeremy Corbyn, and I know we've just had the local elections, but I think it's a bit too early to be taking much analysis from this, because the campaign for the general election has just begun. And I just think Jeremy Corbyn's got a lot more in his back pocket, if you like, than people give him credit for. And listening to some people speak tonight, I just think that I don't understand why people are so against him personally, really. I think everything he stands for kind of aligns with what I would assume most good, decent people would agree with. And
well, it may be, but it may be the route to which that those things that he's offering isn't the route that they think is the right one.
Yes, but why is that so important? I mean, that seems important to people, I understand, but why is that important? And surely it's the only thing he's failing at is basically he's refusing to kind of play along with this kind of crazy media storm that goes on and this kind of popularity contest. And what he's saying to people is that I'm not going to get a vote in that. I'm going to stand my ground and stand up for what I believe in. I just personally, I'm 29 years old. I do not understand why people seem to be so positive about the Conservatives. The only reason I can possibly think is people of a latter age, people of a different generation, just want to protect their wealth. And, I can understand that. But, my parents lived through a boom generation, under another Labour government, fair enough. But I think surely people can see that that was recklessness. Building a strong economy is great, but there was never any trickle down to the poorest in society. And I think what we're seeing here now is the Conservatives and Theresa May about to push forward with a Brexit negotiation. So basically, ultimately, her only important factor is to support the rich and ultimately neglect those in most need. And I think particularly if you ask people of my generation what do they want for the future of their country, it's fairness. It's great that our parents grew up in a generational age where they basically could acquire easy wealth, comparatively easy wealth. And I don't understand why they don't see that what their children want is a fair society for everybody, because it's not easy to walk into a £100,000 a year job these days. People used to walk into those jobs without a degree. Well, you say that, but people used to walk into high-paid jobs in the city, into banks and places like this.
Really? You walked into high-paid jobs? I don't ever remember that happening.
When I say walk into high-paid jobs, I mean...
That's exactly what you just said.
Yes, but what I mean by that is that basically they're obviously fully qualified for the job, but the qualifications required for that job are not as high as they are today.
Well, but there were graduates leaving university now, going into jobs in the city and earning £60,000 a year. When I graduated, admittedly it was quite a long time ago, you were lucky to get £15,000. So,
sorry, how many of these graduates do you know that are walking into these jobs? I mean, it's an incredibly competitive environment. I mean, a 2-1 degree these days, does not get you through any door.
No, I
you
think-
know, these CVs are tossed aside, and I just think as a young person, I'm sorry, almost 30 years old, but as a kind of middle,
Well, that's still young.
that's very young.
That's young.
The future of our country.
Brendan,
why would I back an ideal
all right.
that has proved to be ineffective?
What you're
in terms of
saying
supporting people in our society?
very much echoes our Labour spokesman here tonight, Matt Zarb-Cousin, but I know that Gavin Barwell will want to address some of those points that you have made.
This is exactly the sort of solution to that problem that Theresa May is offering. When she stood in front of Downing Street, when she on her first day as Prime Minister, she talked about trying to make sure that the economic success we've been having as a country as a whole works for everybody. And if you look at the latest, if you look at the latest ONS data,
Hang on, Brendan.
because we all have our political prejudices, we all have our views of what's happening. You look at the latest ONS data, actually the poorest people in society saw the biggest increase in our income. Not just within Britain, but if you actually then compare Britain with other countries around the world, dramatically better position.
In this country acquired more wealth over the last 12 months than the richest.
I'm talking about income changes, and that's partly as a result of policies that Conservatives in government have introduced, the national living wage that we've introduced. Now, you're struggling to understand. You have a perception that the Conservative Party is just in favour of wealthy people, and you're struggling to understand why the polls are as they are. But actually, if you look now, the Conservative Party is the party of working class people. The polls show that more working class people support the Conservative parties and Theresa May than do Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party.
But you're taking this information off local elections that have just run.
I'm taking it off polling data.
The mainstream media crucify Jeremy Corbyn at every turn. There's no wonder.
You're not allowed. We're not even entertaining that one again, Brendan. Thank you for your call, Brendan and Beckenham. Matt, I know you want to.
Yeah, Gavin and Conservatives talk about a strong economy as if it's some kind of abstract thing that's to be managed. I mean, the economy really relates to how much money is in people's pockets. And in the last 10 years, wages have been stagnant. GDP is down. Productivity is down.
GDP is not down.
Productivity per hour worked.
GDP is not down.
GDP per hour worked is down. So the economy's not grown in the last 10 years, right? The
economy has grown in the last 10 years.
The levels of productivity have not grown. GDP per hour worked has gone down. So, I don't recognise what you're talking about when you're talking about a strong economy. I don't understand who that benefits.
So let me tell you what I'm talking about. I'm
not
talking about an unemployment rate that is incredibly competitive compared to other major European economies. People that would have been out of work, if you look in France or in Spain or in Italy or in Greece, are in work in this country.
But Gavin Barwell, that a big chunk of those jobs have been people going self-employed off their own
proportion,
bat.
And some of that is people choosing to do it. If it's people that are not choosing to do it, that's a different issue. And actually, one of the things, coming back to your caller, one of the things that Theresa's done straight away is to set up this review that's looking into working practices in the modern economy and looking about whether we've got the right balance there. But look, you're talking about what does a strong economy look like? It's an economy where we're bringing the deficit down. It's an economy where unemployment is low. It's an economy that is growing quicker than our other major competitors. And why is that important? And it is important that we make sure that everyone benefits from that. But it's important from a centre-left perspective. It's generating the tax income that can pay for our vital public services. That's why it's important.
And Dick Newby from the Lib Dems, what are Labour and the Conservatives missing when it comes to social mobility? Because that's something that an awful lot of work has been done on by Alan Milburn and others, where whatever we hear about wages, whatever we hear about growth, we know that social mobility is a problem in this country in a way that it had not entirely but largely stopped being.
Yeah, I think it has. From even from the years when I was going to university, there was a sense that you could do better than your parents, wherever you came from, and that has jotted to a halt. I think the single biggest problem is that since the financial crisis, real wages haven't increased, and many jobs, which are good things, are more insecure, and with that has come a sense of greater instability in people. But I don't think it's fair to blame, certainly not the coalition, I would say that because I was a member of it, for that, or indeed this government entirely for that. We're dealing with a long-term problem of low productivity across the West. Look at what's happened in America, fueling Trump. We've got to work very, very hard to get back to improving levels of productivity, which give the real wage increases which our parents and we got used to.
In Wales, Labour are on 80 seats, down 17. Independents 75 plus 14. I'm not quite sure why there's this independent trend in Wales. Conservatives 31 plus 7. Liberal Democrats 13 minus 3. Plaid Cymru 9 minus 1. That's as of 2 minutes ago. Let's go to Tony in Greenwich. Hello, Tony.
Oh, hello there.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Well, I just wanted to sort of highlight and emphasise this whole working class switch to the Tory party that I think is really fascinating and has sort of happened in my family. That's what I was wanting to say, really.
This is not new, though, is it? Because this happened in the early 1980s when Margaret Thatcher offered council house tenants the right to buy. I can remember campaigning in the 1983 election in a very poor council estate in Norwich. I was the campaign manager in this ward, which probably had, I don't know, about 2,000 or 3,000 voters in it. And it was a ward that the Conservatives had never, ever campaigned in before. And when those ballot boxes opened at the count, I remember pulling the candidate over and saying, look at this. And they would, I won't say they were all Conservative, but they were certainly 40 or 50% Conservative. And that meant that he won what was a very marginal seat, because it was people like you, Tony, who were coming out to vote Conservative for the first time. And so a generation later, you're telling me that it's history repeating itself.
This is quite different, actually. I was born in a caravan. I'm a Romany gypsy. You know, my partner, my male partner, we're gay. He was born in a council flat in East London. His family are tribal Labour. I mean, I've known him. We've been together for 25 years. You know, his whole family are, you know, mirror reading tribal Labour. None of them.
I think you said mirror reading trots for a minute.
Yeah, they have all. They've all shifted over. They're all Tories now. And actually, I was chatting to his sister the other day, and she was saying, "I'm scared. I'm scared that Jeremy Corbyn might get in." You know, she's telling everybody, "Vote Tory." I think it's a very interesting phenomenon.
Well, if Matt Zarb-Cousin wasn't depressed before he heard your call, he probably is now, Matt.
Well, I think that, as I said previously, I think people's opinions of Jeremy Corbyn will change in the general election campaign. And, you know, I think that people have had a very distorted impression of him.
Let's bring in Gareth Knight briefly just before the news headlines. LBC's elections analyst. The Conservatives have held Essex. Any other results?
There's no real surprise. I just want to say a quick thing about this age demographic issue that came up in a call just then and sparked a bit of a conversation. There's always been this legend that people get more and more conservative the older they get, and it is actually factually correct. But generally speaking, the party that wins a general election has to carry virtually every generation, with the possible exception of the very youngest and the very oldest. To give you an example, in 1997, so people that voted for the first time, which included me, our generation, my generation, was the most liberal with a small L generation ever. Tony Blair was so confident that we would vote to join the euro that he actually thought he could win a referendum, and it was William Hague's big campaign that stopped that happening. Fast forward to the referendum last year, that exact same generation, people my age, voted 52-48 in favour of remaining. So my people I went to school with were so liberal and radical that we were going to join the euro, and then 20 years later we only just wanted to stay in the EU as a generation. It's a simple fact. It might be something to do with self-employment, it might be something to do with people paying taxes, but the older they get, the more conservative they get. And if people had said to me, 20 years ago that I would be in a generation that would practically leave the EU in terms of people my age voting, people would never have believed it. So, gentleman that called in a few moments ago, I think he was 29 years old. In 20 years' time, I'm sure that he'll be more than welcome to phone in, and I bet you his views have changed.
Thank you for now, Gareth. Gareth Knight, LBC's elections analyst. Stay with Ian Dale, Sheila Fogarty, LBC until 4. Stay beyond then, but until 4 we'll continue to bring you those results coming in the local elections and in those metro mayoral election results as well. Gavin Barwell here for the Conservatives, Matt Zarb-Cousin representing Labour, and Dick Newby is here from the Liberal Democrats. We want to hear from you very much as well. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. It's 2:32. Let's get Just been having a really interesting conversation here off air, which I want to bring on air with my guests, Ian Dale, Sheila Fogarty, with you till 4, bringing you the election results and just reflecting on what's going on in British politics, actually, both locally and nationally, as we head towards a general election on June the 8th. Gavin Barwell is here from the Conservatives, Matt Zarcousin here for Labour, Dick Newby here for the Liberal Democrats, and still with us is Gareth Knight, LBC's elections analyst. We were talking earlier on, Matt, I think with you about you firmly believe that Jeremy Corbyn's door-to-door and face-to-face meetings are what are going to win him more votes than people imagine.
Not just that. I mean, I think as people become more engaged with politics, as we near the general election, I think people will see more of him on broadcast, they'll be more engaged with it, read up about his policies, and I think they will see a different side to Jeremy than they may have seen through the prism of the printed press.
And Gavin Barwell, your majority is very small, isn't it, in Croydon?
165 votes.
So despite this apparent swing towards your party, you're taking nothing for granted in canvassing.
I just think whenever you stand for election, it's really important not to be complacent at all and to fight for every single vote. And I have always treated my constituency in that way, and I think that's what all candidates have to do. You have to not take anyone's vote for granted, and if people want Theresa May as Prime Minister after this election or me as the MP, they need to come out and vote for it and not assume the polls are telling them what's going to happen. We just had a really good piece of news in, which is it looks like we've taken control of Gloucestershire County Council. Which is an impressive gain. Some particularly good gains in Gloucester itself.
I think that's one where we probably would have all thought it was a Conservative council already.
But in this age of digital campaigning, there's no substitute, is there, Dick Newby, for that face-to-face exchange?
No, because it's only, in my experience, it's the only way you can really engage with people. A lot of people do telephone canvassing now, and you can't actually make it work.
Do you know,
I hated
doing that.
I hate
absolutely
telephone
hated
canvassing.
it.
But if you take the Richmond Park by-election, where I spent quite a lot of time talking to people, I reckoned if I spent an hour and a half or 2 hours on the doorstep talking to people, with a bit of luck I persuaded one person to vote. But I think that because lots of us did it, that made the difference. Without that effort, I'm absolutely convinced we couldn't have won. It was only by engaging with people and talking them through the issues.
That's a very interesting thing that you've just said there, because who was I having a conversation with yesterday? Someone from this Progressive Alliance organisation that they want to sort of other parties to stand down, so Sarah Olney has a clear run against Zach Goldsmith. And I said to them, I think Zach Goldsmith is going to retake that seat. And they looked at me in absolute surprise and horror. And I said, well, you can't do all of that door-to-door stuff in that constituency because it won't be a by-election, because the Liberal Democrats have got other fish to fry in this election in Twickenham, in Kingston and elsewhere in London. So you're not going to get that level of campaign. No. So you look at the majority that Zach Goldsmith had in 2015 and it was 24,000. Now, it won't be that large, but I would predict, if I had to make a prediction, I would predict that he would.
There's another really important difference, which of course that was a by-election, so you were just choosing who your MP was going to be. This is a general election, so there will be arguments about who do people want to be Prime Minister, and that will be a key factor. And clearly with the Liberal Democrats, you can't guarantee that you're not going to then have Jeremy Corbyn.
Isabel has called from Hemel Hempstead.
Everybody's just not everybody can actually see the studio, but everybody's, if not laughing out loud at the prospect of Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister, smiling broadly, because everybody knows that Jeremy Corbyn is not going to be Prime Minister.
You can't make that assumption.
Yes, you
can.
Matt was smiling at the mention of Jeremy Corbyn.
So sorry.
I don't think
yes, I'm doing Matt down. I shouldn't do that.
Let me bring in Isabel from Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire. Hello, Isabel.
I was just going to say, first of all, about 10 minutes ago, there's a really intelligent guy on there called Brendan. If it were more people who were intelligent like that, we'd have a proper Labour government. Anyway, what I was going to say, it's the print media. People are brainwashed. Every time you see a newsstand, you've got headlines from Daily Mail and the Express, not the Sun, nobody takes it seriously, but the Daily Mail and the Express demonising Jeremy because he's proper Labour, and people are so used to having a plastic Labour with a silly, false, insincere grin like Tony Blair was. Anyway,
Isabel,
you've just done it just now. You demonised him, or somebody did in the studio.
Isabel,
people say Jeremy, and then people laugh. And if you say lies enough times, I think they said Matthew's right, said it was 7 times, then it sticks and people believe it.
If you go back to 1997, what do you think the Daily Mail said about Tony Blair?
I don't know what it was, but
well, I'll tell you what it was. They portrayed him with demon eyes. They were very much against Tony Blair in that election, and Tony Blair won a massive majority. So there were people there complaining that the media were against Tony Blair.
people wanted to get rid of that government, and they'd do anything to get rid of that government. And anyway, what I was trying to say, if Jeremy got on programmes, on television programmes and all over, and people could actually...
He keeps turning us down, Isabel.
I don't think you've ever asked him.
Honestly, Matt Zarb-Cousin will tell you the number of times I've asked Jeremy Corbyn to come on this programme, on this station, and he hasn't appeared since the general election. Nick Ferrari keeps asking him to go on his programme. I'm sure James O'Brien would love to have him on his programme.
And when everybody, Isabel, was saying, oh, look how mean they're being to Ed Miliband over was it a bacon sandwich, over the bacon sandwich? Look at poor old Theresa May with her chips in Cornwall, wherever she was.
It wasn't quite the same extent, to be fair.
She won't do a debate because she's scared of talking to Jeremy Corbyn. She didn't say that, but that's the reason. And she said she'd debate every week. Well, that's Prime Minister's question. Well, not with no answers.
Isabel, can I ask you why, when you see these headlines which are brainwashing everybody else, why aren't you brainwashed? Why do you presume that other people are brainwashed by these headlines?
No, automatically we have to have a Labour government, but there are people...
What do you mean automatically?
There are people who have been believed that, they have to, when people got a chance to buy their new Towns Commission houses, before Mrs Thatcher had thought about buying council houses, because that's what they were around here, a lot of people thought, we bought our own house now, we'll have to vote Conservative, and people still think that, some people do. But I don't understand...
You basically think everyone else is thick and you're intelligent, don't you?
They hear about children's schools and having to cut back on teachers, us getting funding for not just extras like they used to do, but for actual essentials. And now there's talk of having a 4-day week. And then they see about hospitals, which has not been in the news at all in the last 2 weeks, Kelsey, please.
Seriously?
And if Theresa May took a little walk outside her house and walked along Victoria Street, what would she see? Hundreds of people just sleeping on the street.
Hundreds of people sleeping on Victoria. I'll tell you what, I walk up and down Victoria Street all the time. I don't see hundreds of people sleeping rough on Victoria Street.
Isabel, thank you for your call.
Nothing like exaggerating to make a point.
I think it's clear how Isabel is going to vote. Thank you for your call, Isabel in Hemel Hempstead. Sam has called from Lancaster. Hi, Sam.
Hi, good morning.
You are a Labour supporter, a Labour member as well?
Yeah, I'm a Labour member, yeah.
And what are you thinking right about now?
I'm thinking most people see what I see, which is a Labour leader who's completely out of his depth, who doesn't have the support of the parliamentary party, who's never held a shadow cabinet position before he became leader, and whose personal opinion ratings are pretty much unmatched for their awfulness. The more people see of Jeremy, the less they like him. It's a sad fact, but it's true. He should have gone after he was challenged. He should have respected the parliament. Jeremy Corbyn.
Who should be leader instead? Because we tried Owen Smith in